listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from the divided states of America, fixated between our ever-expanding rift on our collective ideology. I'm your political analyst fighting for the right, Austin Pelly.
And in the left corner, I am your indefatigable, your ever-vigilant, your burning ember in the darkness, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And that means that you are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. You know, I gotta be honest, I was trying to save this conversation for the second hour because my whole intro for the second hour was going to be The Wet Bandit and try to see when you would get, if you would get that reference, which is, of course, Home Alone.
Yeah.
I've decided, you know what? I got an hour. I can think of a new one. And instead, I'm going to talk about it now.
Go for it.
What the heck, Mother Nature? Why did you rain on me for 30 hours straight? Like, what's going on? We didn't have a reprieve at all. I walked into work today at like 6:30 a.m.
In the middle of the...
6:30 a.m. I walked into work and some random dude's like covering his head. He's like, dude, DC weatherman. I'm like, I know.
Yeah. You didn't know it was going to rain? Or you didn't see it?
I didn't.
You walked out the house and was like, how long is it going to last?
Okay. When you're waking up at like 5:45,
right,
and trying to get out of the house within like 20 minutes, including shave, shower, all of that.
Right.
Within 20 minutes. No, I don't take the time to check the weather.
You go.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's a
I'm
wet,
a betting
wintry.
Man.
Yeah, it's a wet, wintry day today. I mean, look at it this way. I got to move in this weather. So,
oh yeah,
you know, so it's like movers and everything else.
Forget what I said. Yeah,
immediately after work.
You win.
Yeah. So, yeah. But it's okay. No worries.
It's okay, and we do have it better than a lot of the other states, as we will hear in a moment.
Yes.
In our headlines. Speaking of, man, I am on fire lately with these transitions. Let's get into our headlines. COVID news yesterday. In the United States, there were 356,256 new COVID cases reported, along with 2,632 deaths. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 356,849 cases per day, a decrease of 52%. We hit that 50% threshold from the average 2 weeks ago. 64% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 75% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 75,924,742 people across the United States and killed 896,183 people. In national news, Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor and my hero, and 2008 Republican, not exactly, U.S. vice president candidate, went to trial against the New York Times on Thursday in a highly anticipated defamation case that could test longstanding protections for American news media. Palin, 57, is suing over a 2017 editorial that incorrectly linked her political rhetoric to a 2011 Arizona mass shooting that left 6 dead and U.S. Representative Gabby Gifford seriously wounded, and which the newspaper later corrected. To win, Palin must offer clear and convincing evidence that the Times acted with actual malice, meaning it knew the editorial was false or had reckless regard for the truth. She is seeking unspecified damages for the alleged harm to her reputation. I don't see her winning this. At the same time, I mean, the Times came out and said, look, it was a mistake. That's why we corrected it. That's kind of the nature of a super fast medium, which I get. And so her grievances hold water.
Yeah.
Her grievances of, hey, like, this is essentially defamation. And to which they're saying, yeah.
We made a mistake.
But we made a mistake.
Yeah.
Not, we did this on purpose. So it's really hard to prove that unless you have some sort of emails that we have no idea.
Yeah.
Of course, this comes because it was supposed to take place, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago. And Palin tested positive for COVID.
Right.
So they had to delay the trial until yesterday. Moving on, though, the Freedom Convoy is graduating outside the confines of the Great North. A group of American truckers are seeking to piggyback off the publicity and momentum of the protest by bringing it to D.C. The protest would include American and Canadian truckers driving from Ottawa to D.C., accruing more members along the way. The Facebook group, I refuse to say meta group, named Convoy to D.C., amassed more than 100,000 followers in a single day, but has been removed from Facebook for, quote, repeatedly violating community guidelines, end quote. Regardless, the protest is expected to continue next month. We'll see, though. In international news, China's Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin of Russia have signed a joint statement calling on the West to, quote, abandon the ideologicized approaches of the Cold War, as the two leaders showcased their warming relationship amid a tense standoff with the West ahead of the Beijing Olympics. In the joint statement released by the Kremlin, Putin and Xi called on NATO to rule out expansion in Eastern Europe, denounced the formation of security blocs in the Asia-Pacific region, and criticized the AUKUS trilateral security pact between the United States, UK, and Australia. After the meeting, the pair will attend the Olympic opening ceremonies in the evening. That'll begin in a couple hours here. Russia has said it is closing the Moscow bureau of German broadcaster Deutsche Welle and revoking staff accreditations in Russia in response to Berlin's ban on the German language channel of Russian state TV network RT. Thursday's announcement comes with tensions mounting between Russia and the West, particularly over fears of a Russia invasion of Europe's ally Ukraine. The move comes after Germany's broadcasting regulator on Wednesday announced it was banning the transmission of the channel RTDE over the lack of a broadcasting license. There is a lot to unpack there later. Sweden will lift pandemic restrictions next week despite record levels of infections as it banks on booster shots and high rates of past COVID-19 infections to keep hospitalization rates manageable. A number of Sweden's neighbors and fellow European Union members have announced easing of their pandemic rules in the last week. Nightclubs in Denmark are reopening. Thank goodness, because we need to party. And the government said it no longer considered COVID a quote-unquote socially critical disease. Norway is dropping its testing requirements for arriving travelers who are fully vaccinated. And Finland has said it would end all of its remaining restrictions this month. In Earth and Science news, the massive winter storm hitting central, eastern, and southern U.S. has knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. Multiple states have issued emergency warnings, including Indiana, reporting 14.7 inches of snow yesterday. Other states on the top of the snowfall list include Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and Vermont. And then in holiday news, today is National Wear Red Day. Hey, we celebrated.
Yeah,
we both checked. National Bubblegum Day. And in Taiwan, it's Farmer's Day. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas. All right. We actually celebrated. We're both wearing red.
I know, right?
And I like how we both instinctually just like check. Wait, what? Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yes. So.
Where you want to go first?
Russia banning Deutsche Welle.
Yes. I saw that.
This is a huge update.
I mean, I was watching the guy from DW basically crying on air. You know, it was like, oh, they were removing me off the air. We didn't do anything wrong, and this is just retaliatory.
You know who else didn't do anything wrong?
Yeah.
RT Deutsch.
Exactly.
RTDE.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, dude, why didn't you expect them to respond? Meaning, it's like, so you can get rid of that network. You can basically, because the German government is acting as if, oh, we have nothing to do with this. We have nothing to do with this. Nonsense. Nobody believes that. And so, yeah, of course they're going to respond. And their response is, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. You're not going to allow us to have it on. We're not going to allow you. And the first thing, oh, I can't believe they're doing this. They're punishing us. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, dude, calm down.
So you watched this live?
Yeah.
So was he saying, so how does Russia condone it? Are they saying like, hey, a licensing agreement?
Well, Russia's looking at it as
or did they just blatantly say no?
It's quid pro quo as far as I know. I mean, they told the people to basically leave. I mean, because he was like, they're making our reporters leave, and the people who love the Russian culture, they can't stay now. I mean, like, dude is basically having this kind of meltdown without acknowledging or even dealing with the fact of Russian concerns. You are not allowing us to get our broadcasting license in that country. And then, not just that, the way you're going about it is just duplicitous. I mean, like Peter Oliver was saying yesterday, this is what, out of Serbia or something like that. One way that you have a contract, you're supposed to be able to do this in European states. And RT Deutsche is actually popular. Like, even with them doing all of that stuff, from the standpoint of the YouTube and everything else, it was still a popular show. And so, yeah, you can't necessarily cry on air after basically doing the same thing to another country's media spot.
Does Deutsche Welle, DW, does it represent the German government? Because the German government made the decision to say, RT, you're off.
Oh, no. It's not that they represent the German government. They're looking for parity. It's like when we were in the United States and they said, okay, Russia, you're going to have to sign up for some kind of, thing saying that you're a foreign actor and everything else. Well, Russia turned and did the same thing to CNN and these other guys. All right, well, you guys need to do the same thing. This agency didn't exist at first. This agency exists now since you're making us do it. They're just looking at for reciprocity. They're looking for this kind of balance in things.
Do you think that's it?
Yeah.
You think the buck stops here now?
Yeah, I think
Tit for tat, we're done?
I think it's tit for tat. I don't think, because the whole point of, just kind of going a little bit but not too far is just this escalation of the notion of parity. It was looking for balance.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to go further, or what is your thoughts?
Honestly, I don't know if they will. If I was in Putin's shoes, I would say this isn't enough.
Oh, really?
I would go further. I would go. I would personally go further.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why I'm not the president. So.
I mean, they're being kicked out, so it's not like they can't broadcast at all, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, but neither can RTDE.
Well, right. No, I agree with the act. I mean, there should be parity in regards to the way the country is responding to it. So, no, I think the act is fine.
Then, do you see DW being reinstated after? Because RTDE is going to take it to court,
right,
in Germany.
DW is also.
They should win it. I don't know. We don't know if they will.
Who knows at this point?
We don't know what's going to happen out of it. But if they win it, do you think DW gets reinstated in Russia?
Maybe they should. I would go so far as to say they should. I mean, it seems that this action is more so retaliatory for basically what they were doing to RTDE. And so if one is reinstated, the other should also.
And I'd be curious to know what's Germany's take on this.
Yeah. You mean the government?
No, not the government, but because I know that Russians in general would be like, oh man, this is just an affront on us when they took out RTDE.
Yes, absolutely.
But would Germany be like, hey man, fair play, tail between their legs?
How does the U.S. population deal with stuff like this when we come in contact with it? Do we look at it as fair play, or do we look at it as, I can't believe they did that?
How do we
respond to it?
How do we respond to it? How do we respond to a terrorist attack? Well, we invade a country.
Yeah, right.
So, you spit on me, I murder your family.
Right, pretty much.
That's how the U.S. does it.
So the thought is, if they did that, we'd respond basically in kind. That's the thought.
We would respond with hellfire.
Yeah.
At that point. So, was it tread lightly and carry a big stick? That's how the U.S. does it. I won't start this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything because the U.S. definitely starts stuff. But if you start it, I will darn sure end it.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't be the one to finish it.
That would be the U.S., yes.
But yeah, DW, I get your tears, man, but calm down. You guys started this. This wasn't, meaning your government started this. This wasn't something that, they had their media space once before. DW could advertise whenever they wanted, or at the very least put their stories out. It was because of this part. They consider it grotesquely unfair that they're basically saying, no, we don't want your media organization in our country. But we should totally have our media organization in yours. Get out of here.
Yes. And a couple updates to a couple stories yesterday. First off, the ISIS leader, and this isn't written anywhere, as what I listened to on the way here, so I'm not going to even try to pronounce the names. But the ISIS leader who was killed in the raid apparently put on a suicide vest when, the helicopters were flying for 2 hours. So, of course, he has time to put on a suicide vest. So he put on a suicide vest and killed basically his family, if I can say that. I believe he had multiple wives, so a wife or two and a couple of his children were among the casualties that he killed himself, rather than because he didn't want to be captured.
Right.
So he exploded himself and all that. So that's another update to that story. The second update, I'm curious for you, Jamarl. I'm curious for you, our listeners, if you're engaging in the chat, who did their homework? Did you watch the Giuliani Masked Singer?
No, I did not watch that. How was it? Did you see it?
No.
Was it good?
I didn't see it.
Oh, you didn't see it?
And I feel really bad because I searched longer than I should have.
Yeah.
Probably not as long as I could have. But still, it seems like
because I saw the media reports
taken down immediately. Yeah. Not on YouTube. I could have probably gone to 4chan, but I hate going to.
I really want to see
sites like that. I really want to see it too.
I want to see
I want to see Giuliani, old decrepit Giuliani, sing
and dance across stage,
sing like a canary.
Yeah.
Just watch him belt out the most beautiful voice you've ever heard.
Yes, and dance across stage
And then I want to watch the judges be like, no, walk out.
The walking out part is such rejection. It's like leaving.
Yeah.
That's that. I don't know how you get across utter distaste, other than maybe just if they would have turned around and spit on the side or something like that. The moment that he took his helmet off. But no, man, I am very interested in Giuliani's singing voice. I want to hear it.
Mark, thank you for the correction. Apparently, it's Dushavela.
Dushavela. Okay.
Would be the correct way of saying DW.
Yeah.
Dushavela. I can't guarantee that I will stick to it, but I will try my best. Thank you for that. But yeah, Mark, we appreciate it. And anybody else in the chat section, if you found this video, I want to hear about it.
Right. Let us know.
I want to hear about it. At the very least, put it in the chat section. At the most, we're going to have a call-in segment coming up.
Yeah.
So please
call in. Let us know your thinking. I mean, I definitely want to see it. I mean, when I heard about it, I was like, no way, they can't be serious. Oh, by the way, did you see the video that I sent you on the new Marvel card? Well, this was a while back. This was the New Mutant thing. I was Safe Space.
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh, I said there's. When we were talking about it once before, you was like, is that serious? Safe Space. There was another one, Snowflake. And there was another character that Marvel was making.
Wait, are these genuine or are these parodies?
Are real characters.
Oh.
The link that I sent yesterday was the guy basically prefacing or coming up with them saying, yeah, these are going to be a new brand of characters. And so we need these guys to be more, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, but a character named Snowflake, I mean, the left takes that as an offensive term.
I know, but his point is we're going to turn this into a positive term. And so we're gonna.
Oh my gosh!
I swear.
But that's like saying we're gonna take back the swastika.
Yes.
Because the swastika meant like inclusivity, right? It meant like power or something outside of
Nazi thing. But I know what you mean.
Outside before the Nazis took it, it was like peace and prosperity or something.
It's like we're taking that back from the Nazis. It's like good luck, buddy.
I don't know about that.
Good luck. But yeah, that was his thought. That this is going to be. We're going to take these terms back. These terms aren't going to be used as pejorative. And so these comic book characters are basically going to hold these terms. It's just like, dude, just stop. Just stop. Like, why do you need this? Why do you need to screw up comic book characters like Lieutenant Uhura and the best characters that people think of when they're thinking of either movies or characters or something to that effect? The reason they like those characters is because those characters were fleshed out. Those characters represented something. They were either heroic, they either went through something, etc. They didn't build a script around the notion of, okay, let's get a black character and then build a story around them. It's not that way. It's the other way around, meaning what they're trying to get out of this is kind of pushing a certain message on various people when they're looking at television and everything else. Okay, fair enough. But that stuff has to be done with a light touch. And if you hit it too hard, people are going to know that you're basically trying to influence their point of view, and it's going to undermine whatever you're trying to do. Creating a character called Safe Space.
You know what? Maybe I'm for this. Because if no, maybe I'm for this because if Marvel wants to take this comic book series and make it like alt left, so far left where you can like we'll crowdsource it essentially as to what the characters' names are and what their next adventure is. Maybe
they're gonna go broke.
Maybe no. Well, I want them to do that.
Yeah.
If that means that they can finally take the progressive pushing of LGBTQIA inclusion and all that in our other shows that weren't written as that, but they're now trying to force feed us as that.
Yeah.
If they can take that out and just worry about the storyline of the other ones, but then still say like, hey, we're all for inclusion because we're dedicating this whole show to it. Yeah.
I see. Get a Sin Eater comic book. Basically have a comic book that says, okay, well, I can point to that. There's our inclusivity comic book that has all of the characters in it, non-binary, black, white, straight, gay, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, but instead of taking Mandalorian and saying, now, Gina Carano, you can't be on here, or the new Boba Fett series, you can tell what I've been watching lately, and saying, like, all of a sudden, he's trans and things like that. Just, like, out of the blue that wasn't there. Take out that garbage.
Yeah.
And just have it on a separate show.
Agreed. Because one guy, when they were talking about Star Trek, he was like, he got a letter that somebody got very angry at him because he was like, we assumed 7 of 9 would be gay. And it's like, why? Why do you assume that? Like, what? Like, you're watching Star Trek and you get so animated that that particular character is not what you believe that character should be. So you write a dirty letter to the person who wrote it. And then for the person who writes it to say, yeah, that's not a bad take. In which case, he's going to basically change Star Trek into woke Trek or something like that. He didn't need to do that. The power of Star Trek was that stuff was already there as a basis of the culture and society that those people were living in. You're screwing up art, and you're screwing up various franchises. That's all I'm putting. That's all I'm saying. It's called right here, New Warriors. This came out last year, March 17th, 2020. The only reason I brought it up yesterday or sent it because I saw it. I mentioned it to you once before. And it's New Warriors trailer, Marvel Comics. And he goes in and explains why he's using these characters. I mean, one of the characters, there's a chubby woman, there's Safe Space and Snowflake. I don't know who the person is behind the back, but good luck. Good luck. You guys are listening to Fault Lines, Thomas and Pelly. We're going to come back in a moment. There is a fantastic video. I don't remember which one. Was it you or
Jack?
Jack that found it. Okay, yeah. Our producer, Jack, found this phenomenal video by Ned Price. And I'm sitting there watching, thinking to myself, this is what journalism looks like. And why doesn't this happen more often? And if it did happen more often, this notion of wars and whatnot will be less likely. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We'll be back in a moment.
Fault Lines.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Pelly, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys just so happen to find yourself in this, let's say, weathery or wet D.C. area, you can always catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Austin and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps makes the show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. As I mentioned earlier, this was a phenomenal video. Matt Lee basically pushes spokesperson or State Department spokesperson Ned Price for evidence. That's all. Hey, I understand you're saying that, but where's the evidence? And Ned Price utterly and completely melts down. It's as if he was bothered by the very fact of the person saying, where's your evidence? Where's your information? I get you're telling me this, but you telling me this is not the exact same thing as something actually being true. Ned Price seems to be entirely and completely unprepared for this, and not just unprepared for this, catches a serious and severe attitude at the reporter for doing his job. Let's play the clip. This is basically Ned Price being asked, where's your evidence? Ned Price was arguing that Russia was trying to start a false flag, that they were trying to come up with a pretext by which to invade Ukraine. Now, for the longest time, the U.S. has been saying, oh, it's an imminent attack. It's an imminent attack, despite the fact that Ukraine, the country that's supposed to be, quote unquote, imminently attacked, saying, calm down. This is not the case. That is not true. Calm down. Pump your brakes. You're going too far. So, Ned Price, coming up with this, I guess, the second or third iteration of this notion of something is about to happen. In this case, false flag, etc. But listen to the reporter and ask yourself, is the reporter correct here? And ask him for evidence. Let's play the clip.
Okay, well, that's quite a mouthful there. So you said actions such as these suggest otherwise. Suggest meaning that they suggest they're not interested in talks and they're going to go ahead with some kind of a... What action are you talking about?
One, the actions I've just pointed to. The fact that Russia continues to engage in disinformation campaigns.
You've made an allegation that they might do that. Have they actually done it?
What we know, Matt, is what I have just said, that they have engaged in this activity, in this planning activity. But let me because obviously this is not the first time we've made these reports public. You'll remember that just a few weeks ago.
I'm sorry, made what report public?
If you'll let me finish, I will tell you what report we made public. We told you a few weeks ago that we have information indicating Russia also has already prepositioned a group of operatives to conduct a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine. So that, Matt, to your question, is an action that Russia has already taken.
It's an action that you say that they have taken, but you have shown no evidence to confirm that. And I'm going to get to the next question here, which is, what is the evidence that they I mean, this is like crisis actors, really? This is like Alex Jones territory you're getting into now. What evidence do you have to support the idea that there is some propaganda film in the making?
Matt, this is derived from information known to the U.S. government, intelligence information that we have declassified. I think you know.
Okay, well, where is it? Where is this information?
It is intelligence information that we have declassified.
Well, where is it? Where's the declassified information?
I just delivered it.
No, you made a series of allegations and statements.
Would you like us to print out the topper? Because you will see a transcript of this briefing that you can print out for yourself.
That's not evidence, Ned. That's you saying it. That's not evidence. I'm sorry.
What would you like, Matt?
I would like to see some proof that you that you can show that
Matt, you have
that shows that the Russians are doing this. Ned, I've been doing this for a long time.
I know, that was my point. You have been doing this for quite a while. You know that when we declassify intelligence information, we do so in a means we do so with an eye to protecting sources and methods.
Is not going to fall. I remember a lot of things. So where is the declassified information other than you coming out here and saying?
Matt, I'm sorry you don't like the format, but we have declassified.
It's not the format; it's the content.
I'm sorry you don't like the content. I'm sorry you are doubting the information that is in the possession of the U.S. government.
No,
what I'm telling you is that this is information that's available to us. We are making it available to you in order for a couple reasons. One is to attempt to deter the Russians from going ahead with this activity. Two, in the event we're not able to do that, in the event the Russians do go ahead with this, to make it clear as day, to lay bare the fact that this has always been an attempt on the part of the Russian Federation to fabricate a pretext.
Yeah, but you don't have any evidence to back it up other than what you're saying. It's like you're saying, we think we have information the Russians may do this, but you won't tell us what the information is.
And
then when you're asked...
That is the idea behind deterrence, Matt. That is the idea behind deterrence.
And
it is our hope that the Russians don't go forward with this.
What the information is, you say, I just gave it to you. But that's not what...
You seem not to understand. You seem not to understand the idea of deterrence. We are trying to deter the Russians from moving forward with this type of activity. That is why we're making it public today. If the Russians don't go forward with this, that is not... ipso facto an indication that they never had plans to do so.
But then it's unprovable. I mean, my God. What is the evidence that you have that suggests that the Russians are even planning this?
Matt,
I'm not saying that they're not, but you just come out and say this and expect us just to believe it without you showing a shred of evidence that it's actually true. Other than when I ask, or when anyone else asked, what's the information? You said, well, I just gave it to you, which was just you making a statement.
Matt, you said yourself, you've been in this business for quite a long time. You know that when we make information, intelligence information public, we do so in a way that protects sensitive sources and methods. You also know that we declassify information only when we're confident in that information. If you doubt the credibility of the U.S. government, of the British government, of other governments, and want to find solace in information that the Russians are putting out, that is for you to do.
I'm not asking what the Russian government is putting out, and what is it supposed to mean?
And now he immediately moves when he can't necessarily. How embarrassing is that? What a shallow, tiny, ridiculous little man. I mean, he's basically being asked, hey, where's your evidence? Well, I gave you the evidence. What do you mean? You making a statement as evidence? Yes. What do you mean making a statement as evidence? Are you insane? He's like, well, you've been doing this for a long time. You know how this is done. Yes, I've been doing this for a long time. I know how it's done. I also know that the Biden administration lied about Kabul not falling. I was here when there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And you and your administration are bringing us to the brink of war. You should have a little something more for it than you just standing here saying this nonsense. And he gets snippy about it. He's like, well, and then he's like over talking the guy. And look, if somebody basically says, where's your evidence of this? This is not, like something that the person thought up. You're basically saying, we have reports and we have documents, data, evidence that Russia is planning a false flag in Ukraine in order to create a pretext. Okay, fair enough. Great. Where did you get that from?
I just said it.
Yeah,
I just said it.
Dude, that's not evidence. What do you mean it's not evidence?
Oh, now you're doubting the legitimacy of the U.S. and British governments?
And then he does the transparent, well, if you just want to rely on Russia evidence, then you could do it. It's like, dude, how pathetic are you? How pathetic are you? Where's Jen Psaki? Get Psaki. Psaki
she would have handled it better.
Yeah,
she definitely would have handled it better.
So
I think
better.
that
this was embarrassing, honestly.
It was enough rope to legitimately hang himself.
Yeah.
And he did it super effectively.
Yes, he did. It's like he was utterly shocked that somebody would ask him for evidence.
How dare you push back on me? And how dare when I respond to your pushback, you push back again and again and again. How dare you ask for actual legitimate evidence that Russia was... And think about the accusation here. The accusation is that... And we're not saying that wasn't on the books or planning, but the accusation is that Russia was staging something in order to have an excuse to invade Ukraine.
Yes. Yes.
That is the accusation. And something that monumental.
That's big, right?
It's, of course you're going to get pushed back. So because we know that if Russia invades Ukraine, we've been force-fed and told that would mean a war. Maybe not anymore. We'll see. Yeah. But if for all this time we've been expecting a war, and this would be the catalyst for war, you just expect us to blindly follow?
Yeah, just accept it. But what does that mean for the press under normal circumstances? Like that Price would get into that mindset. Because I think of it, you remember when Biden was asked, he was like, what about African Americans? I'm like, that's okay. If you don't vote for me, you're not black. And I kind of point out that they've gotten so accustomed to African Americans voting for them without wanting anything in return that that's their mindset. We're owed your vote. What about the press here? Where Ned Price takes such issue with somebody saying, where's the evidence for this claim? This is a pretty expansive and large claim, Ned. Where's the evidence? And it's almost as if I am so accustomed to not having been pushed on, to not having to give evidence, to just say whatever I want to say. Oh, Putin has a cow on the moon. Whoa, wait, Putin has a cow on the moon. And they just run with it, right? It's like they've gotten so accustomed to that, that the very fact of somebody asking for evidence is an anomaly. And it's an anomaly that apparently Ned Price can't tolerate.
And you know what? Now there's going to be a meeting with the Biden administration and heads of the press to be like, hey, guys, you messed up. Yeah. You got to handle this a lot better. You got to just accept what we say.
Yes. That's so pathetic.
This, and as you alluded to in your intro to the clip, this is journalism.
Yes. That's their job.
That is what we hit so hard on. Like, it's so easy to take the fear-mongering statement.
Yes.
It's so easy to say Russia is planning to invade and they wanted to stage a false flag in order to do it.
Yes.
It's easy to write that. And it's easy to freak out your viewers or your listeners or your readers or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it sells.
Yeah, it sells.
It's like, harder to say.
Okay, that's great. It draws eyes.
Let's not take that at face value. It's harder to say, this is like the age of muckraking again.
Yes.
You know, let's actually get to the bottom. Where's your evidence? And you know what? Ben didn't even say we had sources that confirmed this. What he did say was, you know that when we declassify information, we do so in a way to protect sources and our avenues of information. But he never actually said there were those in this scenario. And I feel like if he actually had a legitimate claim, he would have said,
yes,
high-profile sources have told us, people on the ground have told us that this was happening, people in the administration, obviously we can't discuss their identities.
And tell me, if they had this, don't you think they would have put this out? Like, if they actually had evidence of this, don't you think they would have said, they would have given it to anybody and everybody that had eyes to read? Here, this is exactly what we were saying. Here's the evidence of this taking place. No, man, this reporter did God's work. He did God's work. And he did his job. And Ned Price was so shocked by this because he doesn't typically deal with people doing their jobs in his front that he just melted down. He could not tolerate it. The guy wasn't even saying that it wasn't true. He wasn't even saying that. He was just saying, okay, Ned, where's your evidence? Crickets. Crickets. Not even just crickets. Just animosity, anger, vitriol, attacks.
Yeah, and maybe this is my naivety about not expecting the U.S. government to lie to this degree, because you could kind of write off Russian troops are on the border because it depends on, well, what you mean by that, like 130 miles-ish from the actual border of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Is that it would mean 300 miles from Kiev, which would be a little bit different. And so it'd be easy to write that off. That's like, okay, you're taking something and interpreting it to mean the worst. You could also say Russian invasion is imminent, which yes, was wrong and they walked that back. But at the same time, that it's still a little subjective as to what imminent really means. Does it mean tomorrow? Does it mean a week? Does it mean a month? I mean, when you're talking about like legitimately like a FOIA request, it's written into law, and New York Times is suing over this, but it's written into law that the government must respond in a timely manner. And basically it's been sent out. And you could say a timely manner. What does that mean? It's been set that it's about 20 days. But you could hear timely manner and think, okay, so they need to respond by the weekend. You could think timely manner and, well, for something as large scale as involving the U.S. government, it would take them a few months to do that.
Right.
So there's still a little bit of subjectivity there.
Yes.
There is no subjectivity here. Russia is staging a false flag in order to have an excuse to invade Ukraine.
Yes.
Either Russia is hungry for a war and the U.S. is doing well with their spies in order to expose this and prevent all that war. Good for the U.S. for wanting peace in this, for preventing all that war. Or this is like the most, there is no gray zone here. This is the most staged press release, essentially, of the U.S.
Yes.
Trying to legitimately paint Russia as not only like, hey, this war is going to happen, they're trying to start this war any day now.
Yes. Something that Russia
that is very, very dangerous.
It's not true. I mean, it's an escalation like nobody's business. And it's not even just escalation. Then he said, well, we're trying to prevent a war. We're trying to prevent this. What? By insisting that the other government is going to stage a... I mean, this flies in the face of everything Russia has basically been saying from the beginning. We don't want to invade Ukraine. We don't want to invade Ukraine. We don't want to invade Ukraine. And they don't necessarily have anything to get out of invading Ukraine. It's a disaster all the way around. But are you going to acknowledge their security concerns or not? Or are you going to continue to do nonsense like this? So yeah, this is so embarrassing. And this is like clown car stuff. This is, I mean, when Biden pulled out of Afghanistan once before and the thing fell apart and Biden was like, no, Kabul, we're just not going to fall. It fell. They're not going to be people hanging off the roof. There were people hanging off the roof, or at the very least of the thing.
We're going to get everyone out of Afghanistan who wants to leave Afghanistan.
And even that wasn't true.
No.
And so it's like all the way through, this has been this kind of cartoonish administration where they're supposed to be the adults in the room. Donald Trump had to leave, so we, the adults in the room, can get on. This is clown stuff. And whether it's Blinken or whether it's Ned Price, who honestly needs to have a different job, this should not be his job. He doesn't do this job all that well, if I'm being honest. He is well above his weight class on this. And he can't even deal with just the most basic of pushback. The guy wasn't being aggressive towards him. The guy didn't attack him. The guy, unless you just consider, where's your evidence as an attack? How dare you, sir? How dare you not take my word for it as evidence? Yeah, the reporter did their job. Shout out to Lee on this. Yeah, this is embarrassing. Let's do this. Let's take a break. Mark Sleboda is going to come on and join us. I want to get his take on this because this is going to be pretty interesting. And there's also this meeting between Putin and Xi Jinping that's taking place. So you guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We'll be back in a moment.
Fault Lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Pelly, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys just so happen to find yourself in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Austin and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with the chat, tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. So I kind of want to get to our guests. You guys heard the last video. You guys heard our take on it. I want to get the take of our informed guest, Mark Sleboda. Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst and easily one of my favorite people on the show and one of our most learned guests. Mark, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning?
Jamarl, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on Fault Lines.
It is always an honor and a pleasure to have you. I am pretty sure you've heard that video with Ned Price. We just played it, where Ned Price is being asked. Ned Price is insisting very strongly, oh, there's a plan that Russia is trying to create a pretext to invade Ukraine because it just wants to get in Ukraine so much. And the reporter, doing his job, patiently asked him, where's the evidence, Ned? To which Ned Price utterly and entirely freaks out, like completely melts down. Well, I gave you the evidence. No, Ned, you asserted that this was going to happen. I'm asking you for the data. Where's the data? Where are you getting this from? Well, you've been doing this long enough. I mean, you should know. I mean, he utterly and entirely loses it with just the smallest push of, where's the evidence for this, Mark? You're saying something pretty explosive. And the reporter even makes a point to him when Mark is like, well, I can't believe you're not going to trust the United States intelligence. Well, he makes a point about, well, I was around during weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I was around doing the Kabul is not going to fall. And I'm pretty sure he could have listed 10 or 15 other items that we were dishonest about, despite the fact that that was told to the American public. There are no boots on the ground. In Syria, we're not going to be helping. The Saudis basically kill Yemenis. All of those things were not being truthful. And so Ned Price is taking all sorts of, I take umbrage at you basically asking me for evidence. What are your thoughts on this? I know you've seen it. It's an utterly amazing clip, to put it mildly.
Yeah, it is very interesting for anyone who is in the journalism business, or should be. And it has to be noted that it was almost simultaneously, right? You know, within a few hours during the same day, it was also happening at the exact same time as Jen Psaki was being confronted on different issues at the White House on recent events in Syria, asking for evidence on the claims that the U.S. claims to have assassinated a new leader of ISIS, and that he had detonated a suicide bomb. And she responded the same way, that we're acting with umbrage. And both Psaki said that, well, if you don't trust my information, perhaps you would prefer to trust ISIS.
Isn't that amazing?
Similarly, Ned Price, when challenged, said perhaps you should seek solace in Russian information, Russian media, and I think Matt Lee probably should, personally. I mean, I'm a little biased, I guess, on the subject, but I think Matt Lee probably should. I mean, Matt Lee often has seemed to me throughout the years, anyone who has followed State Department briefings, as the only journalist in Washington, D.C., or at least the only Western mainstream journalist, shall we say. I think my favorite line, when he was referring to, he said crisis actors, and he says this is Alex Jones level stuff, and to watch Ned Price's face twist up in fury.
He's like, how dare you compare me to Alex Jones?
Yeah, well, I love that. Just how dare you not just take what I'm saying because I'm on a U.S. government podium. And Matt's like, like you said, listing off all the times that the U.S. has lied about intelligence, or, been so incompetently wrong that they should not have that podium, right?
Yeah.
Take your pick there. So it should be illuminating to the way the U.S. treats even its own journalists who dare question its narrative, and the fact that it does not have to provide evidence for its claims because it is the U.S.
Mark, I'm curious, how do you see this going over in Russia? To both the Russian people, but do you think this is a talking point for, let's say, Lavrov to come out and say, you see, even your own press is saying that you're making stuff up here. So what do you think the reaction from the Kremlin is going to be?
I do not think that this has to be a talking point at all. I think that they can just put the clip straight from the White House and the State Department briefings on Russian Channel 1 in the evening with just a bare translation and let the Russian people see for themselves. They do not have to comment.
Yeah. I mean, it's so stark. I mean, just watching it, he did not handle this all that well at all. This was a great clip. Epitome of journalism, I would say. Mark, I want to get into what's taking place, this meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. This is basically, China has basically backed Russia on this issue of Ukraine and backed them strongly. I mean, at the UN Security Council, there was that meeting. And even when the United States basically went to China to ask them for assistance on it, China basically gave U.S. a lesson on backing Russia within the context of that lesson. What are they hope to accomplish here with this meeting? Is this basically just showing solidarity with an ally at this point? Or is there something else that they're working together?
You have to read the joint statement. It's already out in English of the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. And it's their joint statement on the international relations era, international relations entering a new era and the global sustainable development. And, you know, this is the first time that Xi Jinping has met with a foreign leader in 2 years since the coronavirus crisis, and of course it is with Putin, you know, and they have often described each other as best friends, and the closeness of their personal relationship, in this case, is also very important to the international relations situation, and I think this is a very significant moment right here. I think we will talk about this moment in the future, when we're talking about the Winter Olympics in Beijing, that this is when the Sino-Russian Entente was officially declared. And their statement goes over not just Ukraine, but a whole host of laying out their position on international relations, on a multipolar world, on a fight back against foreign, meaning Western meddling, and specifically they use the word color revolutions. They talk not only about Ukraine and the need for NATO to stop expansion, they also talk about the primacy of the international law as defined in the Charter of the United Nations. They talk about the U.S. forming new military alliances in the West Pacific, and how dangerous that is to international stability. And basically, China and Russia are saying quite clearly that they have each other's back against the United States. And I think that they also, specifically the Chinese foreign minister, stated that Russia and China do not have an alliance. Their relationship is stronger and better than an alliance. And I think we need to start, you know, talking about it as of this moment as such. And whether you want to call it the Sino-Russian Entente, whether you want to call it Dragon Bear, something like that, this is, you know, at the very least, a de facto alliance. And I think that this is an important moment that we will talk about in international relations going forward.
Yeah. I'm also curious. I mean, we've seen North Korea ramping up missile testing to try to get themselves in conversations. And they've also said that, you know, China's our closest ally. So do you think that this kind of makes Russia a de facto ally of North Korea, and they could be kind of proponents of North Korea coming to the world stage more against the U.S. after this more than alliance between what'd you call it? The bear and
Dragon Bear.
Dragon Bear, yeah.
Dragon Bear, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And it is certain that Russia does not have a conflictual relationship with North Korea as the United States does. And Russian policy has largely dovetailed for quite some time on Chinese policy towards North Korea, and fighting back against U.S. militarism, and encouraging. Russia, it must be said, also has good relations with South Korea, and a permanent peace is something that is very much in between the two Koreas, is something that is very much in Russian geopolitical and economic priorities. It would benefit them, both ways. So I think that's something that there will definitely push alongside China. Whether we want to talk about some type of de facto military alliance, I think that might be taking it a bit too far, but certainly politically and economically, there is a large amount more cooperation than there is conflict. That's for certain.
Mark, I want to piggyback on something that you said, how this is a new norm or this kind of conversation. In the meeting, they said that there were no limits on the relationship between basically Beijing and Moscow in this particular situation. And it seems as if this is creating this kind of, I guess, power center, diplomatic, economic, militaristic, et cetera. And even from the standpoint of space, that is going to be almost like a counterweight or counterbalance for the U.S. going forward. And this is, look, I think this is going to be one of the most defining relationships going forward into the next 50 years or so. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, how do they view themselves in the context of a global stage or geopolitical order that is as it unfolds going forward?
Yeah, I think they're thinking about it themselves in terms very much like what you just decided there. And in fact, they pointed to specifically that their relationship was not only strong, but actually gained strength because of the environment, of a hostile international environment. And of course, they're specifically talking about the United States there. And the fact that the reason they are so close now, after the events of the last 2 decades, is that the U.S. has pushed them to this.
Right.
And it might be something they might very much thank the U.S. for, considering the advantages that they now have economically, politically, militarily, working together. And it is a new global center of power. China alone, Russia alone against the U.S. and their NATO and other allies, Western allies, what is generally talked about as the West, that is one thing. But when you consider China and Russian together, and possibly, you could throw Iran, the growing relationship with Iran there as well, then suddenly that is an alternate pole of geopolitical power that cannot easily be subsumed in any way by U.S. primacy, hegemony in any shape or form. And we just saw in the last 24 hours, the U.S. threaten China not to try to help Russia avoid potential new rounds of U.S. sanctions, and say that they have ways of dealing with companies, referring to Chinese companies, that try to go around U.S. unilateral sanctions. And I can't imagine, this coming right before this statement is going to fly very well, that type of imperious statement in either Beijing or Moscow.
I think we have the Chinese response for it. Let's play that clip. Yeah, there we go. I wanted to pull that up real quick, just so we can hear Wang Li respond to that.
Can we get the translation
it's
too?
Amazing.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's amazing.
right.
It sounded just like him.
I know, right? I mean, that's astonishing. Like, it's so schizophrenic. I mean, in one sense, the U.S. is going to say, hey, China, we need your help with Russia. And then in another sense, you better not do anything to assist them in this particular situation. This is utterly ridiculous. I mean, this sounds like just clown season. I mean, Donald Trump was supposed to be the one, when Biden comes in, these were supposed to be the adults in the room. But what it basically turns out is that this U.S. policy of isolation has basically isolated themselves. I mean, and pushing so hard, it's almost as if they didn't necessarily understand that you can't, squeeze an orange, but so much. Meaning you have to be aware of how far you can push a particular issue. You need to know your position in the context of the larger world in regards to what you want to accomplish. And if what you are doing is basically pushing what you consider to be enemies closer together to make a unit, and doing so in a way that not just undermines your own position because you're weakening and breaking up your allies in the way that you're going about doing it, you're also making them stronger. Like, this has been an utter complete disaster. What are your thoughts?
The Yeah, the U.S., I mean, we have, I think, already lived through the end of the polar world. We saw its rise and fall within a couple decades. And I think the United States is doing its absolute best on the dawn of a multipolar world to instead see it become a new bipolar world. A new Cold War world divided into two spheres. And they like to frame it, of course, as democracies versus autocracies or something like that. Pay no attention to the fact that we just declared Qatar a major non-NATO ally. Right. One of the most heinous dictatorships and state sponsors of terrorism in the world. Right, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. Right? Pay no attention to the dictatorships on our side over here, and pay no attention to the democracies on their side, because we're the ones who are the real judges of whether another country is democratic or not, right? Yeah, they have elections, we have elections, but our elections are better because we have the electoral college. Oh, maybe we don't want to say that.
We have super delegates and the electoral college and gerrymandering.
Bad talking point.
Yeah, Mark. I guess last question here. How do you see this going over in the States with Xi Jinping and Putin saying like, hey, this is more than an alliance. We're like lovers in the nighttime at this point. And do you think the U.S. is going to go out and say this just solidifies that evil works with evil and we need to fight them at the highest level that we can? What do you see coming out of the States?
The Spectator, just in the last week, the British political magazine, just tossed up a clearly Orientalist, racist cartoon image resurrected straight from the 19th century, depicting Putin as a Russian czar and Xi Jinping as the Western idea of an old racist idea of an old Chinese Mandarin together, somehow bizarrely sticking needles in the world. It was a very bizarre cartoon, but I think you will see much more of that going forward. You will see just headlines wall to wall about the new threat to the United States of the dragon bear or of China, Russia, and so on. And on one hand, you will have the China hawks saying that Russia has no agency, is just a puppet of China, and then you'll have the Russia hawks saying that Russia is dragging China into their war with the United States and so on. But the demonization will reach a new fever pitch.
Yeah,
that's the age of propaganda begin.
Pretty much. Well,
when you have Matt Lee being basically called a traitor for not accept, a Russian, seeking solace in Russian information, and you have White House officials criticizing U.S. senators who dare question that maybe we shouldn't be defending Ukraine as traitors. I think this level of new McCarthyism is going to be very dangerous for a lot of American citizens.
Mark, I want to thank you for this. Well, 30 seconds, Mark, just real quick. The resurgence of ISIS. After spending all of this time basically fighting in the other part of the country, we're seeing this kind of uptick back in ISIS. What is going on that? And like I said, it's only about 30 seconds. I know this is kind of the end.
Yeah, take a look where the first ISIS leader was killed and where the second ISIS leader was killed, and they're both located within a couple kilometers of each other in Turkish-controlled and Al-Qaeda-occupied Idlib in northwestern Syria. And that will answer your question right there, what is going on with the research. I think it answers all of your questions going back a long time about ISIS.
It does. Yeah. I mean, the UN even came out saying this is stocked with like 20,000 terrorists or something to that effect. And we were protecting that terrorist haven. Oh, man. Mark, thank you for this. I appreciate you joining us. Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkSleboda1 and find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We will be back in a moment.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left corner, I'm your ever vigilant, your indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And in the right corner, I'm the spokesman for truth. Wait, what, Jamarl? Where's my evidence? I just told you. Your political analyst, Austin Pelly.
That means you're listening to the spokesman of truth, Austin Pelly, and Jamarl Thomas on Fault Lines. I love that. I love that. That should be a meme by itself. What do you mean you're asking for evidence? I gave you the evidence.
I just told you. You want a transcript? Would you like us to print it out? Because there's a Xerox in the back.
Right. That part is so good. He was like, well, I can give you a readout of this. Like it's almost as if Ned Price is just insisting my word is just evidence. They're sacrosanct. They're the exact same thing.
He does it a lot like Biden, too. That whole interaction was kind of like demeaning. He was like, how? It wasn't just like, I'm offended that you're asking me the question. It's just like, who are you, this lowly little person, to like really challenge me on this? And also like, you sound stupid. You should probably stop talking.
Well, the wild part is him saying, when he said, you've been doing this long enough, I took that to mean, dude, you know how this works. Like, it's this kind of like, dude, you're pushing me pretty hard on this. You know how, it's like, wink, wink. I mean, come on, what are you doing, man? You're making me look bad here. You're asking me for evidence that you know I don't have. You know how this works. Yeah, he knows how this works. That's why he's asking you for the evidence. That's exactly why he's asking you for the evidence, because he knows how this works. You have this situation sometimes, and when John comes in, we can talk to John about it, how they would leak stuff to their various sources. They would leak stuff even when they know that the intelligence is not all that good, but they would leak it because there's certain effects that they want to be able to put into the American conversation. They do it in a heartbeat. Reporters and whatnot, especially in mainstream media, would eat that stuff up and run with it because they care more about the story than the reality of the story. And so when he's asking him about it, I love it. That's what it should be, especially when you're talking about these major issues of war and peace. I mean, it's an extraordinarily good job. Let's get to the headlines. In the news, yesterday in the United States, there were 356,256 new COVID cases reported, along with 2,632 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 356,849 cases per day, a decrease of 52% from the average 2 weeks ago. 64% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 75% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 75,924,742 people across the United States and has killed an unfortunate 896,183 men, women, and children in this country. Number is still going down, so that's good. The number of deaths is just lingering, though.
I mean, 52%
is significant
of a decrease. That literally means that, like, let's cut 300,000 to 150 by 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks after. Let's cut that now to 75,000. Like, that goes down fast.
Yes, it does.
If we keep that rate.
And I'm hoping the deaths just go down right along with it. So, absolutely. Maybe this is... Oh, I don't want to say
don't do it. Don't start
I'm
it.
not going to jinx it.
This isn't real wood. We can't knock.
It's just the end. I'm not going to say it. Whisper a dream. In national news, Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor and 2008 Republican U.S. vice presidential candidate, went on trial against the New York Times on Thursday in a highly anticipated defamation case that could test long-standing protections for American news media. Palin, 57, is suing over a 2017 editorial that incorrectly linked her political rhetoric in 2011 Arizona mass shooting to an Arizona mass shooting that left 6 dead and U.S. Representative Gabby Gifford seriously wounded, and which the newspaper later corrected. To win, Palin must offer clear and convincing evidence that the Times acted with actual malice, quote unquote, meaning it knew that the editorial was false or had reckless disregard for the truth. She is seeking unspecified damages for alleged harm to her reputation. Yeah, I think she's going to struggle to prove that one, but we'll see. A freedom convoy is graduating outside the confines of the Great North. A group of American truckers are seeking to piggyback off the publicity and momentum of the protests by bringing it to Washington, D.C. The protests would include American and Canadian truck drivers from Ottawa to D.C., accruing more members along the way. The Facebook group, I refuse to say meta group. I accept that. Named Convoy to DC amassed more than 100,000 followers in a single day, but has been removed from Facebook for, quote, repeatedly violating community guidelines, unquote. Regardless of the protests, it is expected to continue until next month. In international news, China's Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin of Russia have signed a joint statement calling on the West to, quote, abandon the ideological approach of the Cold War, unquote, as the two leaders showcased their warming relationship amid a tense standoff with the West ahead of the Beijing Olympics. In a joint statement released by the Kremlin, Putin and Xi called on NATO to rule out expansion in Eastern Europe, denounced the formation of security blocs in the Asia-Pacific region, and criticized the AUKUS trilateral security pact between the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. After the meeting, the pair will attend Olympic opening ceremony in the evening. Russia has said that it is closing the Moscow bureau of German broadcaster Deutsche Welle. Yeah, Deutsche Welle, and revoking staff accreditations in Russia in response to Berlin's ban on the German language channel of Russian state TV network RT. Thursday's announcement comes with tensions mounting between Russia and the West, particularly over fears of a Russian invasion of Europe's ally, Ukraine. The move comes after Germany's broadcasting regulator on Wednesday announced it was banning the transmission of the channel RTDE over lack of a broadcasting license. But it's good for the goose, good for the gander. Sweden will lift pandemic restrictions next week despite record levels of infections as it banks on booster shots and high rates of past COVID-19 infections to keep hospitalization rates manageable. A number of Sweden's neighbors and fellow European Union members have announced easing of their pandemic rules in the last week. Nightclubs in Denmark are reopening, because that's what people need at this moment, nightclub. And government said it no longer considered COVID a, quote, socially critical disease, unquote. Norway is dropping its testing requirements for arriving travelers who are fully vaccinated. And Finland has said it would end all of its remaining restrictions this month. In sports news, the Winter Olympics began today as the opening ceremony is happening right now, as we speak apparently. The ceremony is relatively toned down compared with other years due to the coronavirus. All athletes are currently wearing masks when walking with their teams. In Earth and Science news, the massive winter storm hitting the central, eastern, and southern United States has knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. Multiple states have issued emergency warnings, including Indiana reporting 14.7 inches of snow, wow, just yesterday. Other states at the top of the snowfall list include Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and Vermont. In holiday news, we have National Thank a Mail Carrier Day. That's fair. Give Kids a Smile Day. Okay. And National Hemp Day, which is apropos, which is on point, since we have Dr. Kogan coming in talking about marijuana's effect with COVID. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. Those are your headlines. Yeah, that's pretty on point today, since Dr. Kogan sent me a text message yesterday, and he was like, hey, have you seen this study about marijuana and COVID? Now, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Kogan, one of our best guests, love the guy. The guy's a phenomenal guest. He wrote the book, literally, on marijuana and COVID. Not marijuana and COVID, I'm sorry. Marijuana and the medicinal effects of marijuana. So for him to send that is like, yo, right here, right here, Brain Trust, right here, right up in my alley in regards to the book. And so I asked him to come on. I was like, yo, well, can you come on, talk about it, explain it, give us some heads up about what is going on with that particular research and everything else. So he's going to join us at 9-something to have that.
He literally wrote the book.
He literally wrote the book on it. Yeah. Isn't that something? What do you think about the Freedom Convoy coming to D.C.? I do think... Oh,
awesome.
Yeah, I do think they're going to get a huge amount of publicity for it. Considering what's taking place in Canada. I am curious on how long they're going to allow that to continue to take place in Canada.
Oh, National Guard's totally coming into D.C.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But it's definitely going to get a huge amount of publicity, to put it mildly.
Dude, the last time the National Guard was here, they just stayed.
Yeah.
For a long time.
It was a few months, if I'm not mistaken, right? This was after January 6th.
I remember I was driving down back from New York back to D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on the highway, passing the slow lane, and it was tanks of essentially, it was like the canvas carriers, and then there was a tank or two that was being rolled in, and I was like, whoa, wow. What is happening here? And it was it was essentially a convoy, a long convoy. And I felt bad passing it because, if the person driving gets pissed off, then I'm gone. But still, it was kind of cool, but scary to see. So that's totally going to happen again. And I think like America, we are so hot about vaccine versus anti-vax and all of that. And that totally plays into the nature of like free speech. And we're told that we have the freedom to question whatever we want, which is awesome in that sense. So with Facebook, Meta, taking this group off of their platform, I don't know how much of community violated guidelines really occurred, especially because they've made other groups, you know, and like there's been like 5 or 6 new groups on Facebook. Every single one I've looked at, we're like, here are the rules. Be nice. Don't have any racist comments. Like we're here to like actually peacefully protest. Like that is the rules of all these other mini groups that they're trying to get the same behind, the same amount of people behind. But it seems like those are only like 10,000 right now. Because they weren't like one conglomerate group.
They're spread out.
Facebook can easily shut down that one. So if they do get the ball rolling in the States, then I think every state that they pass through and on the front of their trucks that says Freedom Convoy written, I think they're going to get massive support from they drive through a town. All right, I'm taking a week off of work. Let's go.
I think they're going to get a lot of support also. I mean, if you think about it, it's like a lightning rod.
DC's not that big, too.
No, it is not that big.
Doesn't
DC
take that many trucks.
Tiny. I mean, I can't imagine what that would look like in DC. I mean, it would just basically shut the city down at that point. So we'll see.
We're still going to have to go into work.
I am not hoping for that because I'm going to be directly affected by that if that takes place. But we'll see. I mean, I
we'll still have to go in. We'll just have to take the metro or something underground.
Yeah, I guess that's an option. Still not necessarily looking forward to that DC being that crowded.
I mean, I kind of want to see what it looks like, you know?
It's like, bring the confusion.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, man, I live here. But at the same time, like, this is news. And this is journalism, as our friend Matt, the reporter.
You're going to be down there with the microphone, putting it in people's face and,
Oh, absolutely. If they come to DC, absolutely. And there was even a question. I was, like, considering going up to Canada to cover this. And
that would be very cool.
Yeah, but that might not happen now. So,
with the COVID stuff and everything else going on. But, I mean, you're young. You'll be fine.
Are you saying that the COVID's not real? Or COVID doesn't affect...
It's totally
You're saying that COVID doesn't affect young people?
Yeah, it's not as...
Let's go down this road.
It's not as vicious towards young people. But no, man, if they get you the opportunity, definitely take that. But I got to be honest, I would rather that be in Canada as opposed to being here.
Because it doesn't affect your life.
Exactly.
But at the same time,
yes,
they're protesting because it affects their life.
Yes, they are.
Because more so and more so, I think it's pretty safe to say, the unvaccinated are being criminalized.
Depends on where you are, and it depends on what you mean by criminalized.
And they're being segregated against.
Yes, they are being segregated because they're not.
And whether or not vaccinated. You say they deserve it, I mean, it must be tough to hold that view while being told you can't go to restaurants, you can't do a whole bunch of other stuff. So, but
it'd be all right. I mean, to me, my thing is, look, I am clear on how I feel about that part. I mean, the thing is, Omicron shakes that up, or shakes the logic of it up a bit. I mean, for example, for them to say, in Finland said it would end all remaining restrictions, Norway is dropping testing requirements for arriving travelers who are fully vaccinated. Why? I mean, at the point where you're vaccinated, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't necessarily get Omicron. And I didn't understand those rules even when we were traveling, or when I was traveling the first time around. You go into a country, some countries will say, okay, if you're vaccinated, you're clear. It's like, but dude, they're breakthrough infections. What are you talking about?
You know what? If it comes to DC, the convoy, how much you want to bet this January 6th all over again is going to be front and center. And that's going to be the justification of the National Guard. They're going to say, we need to protect American interests and we need to protect our government buildings because the last time you guys did this, you invaded the Capitol.
I could see that. I can see the logic coming out. Or at the very least, I can see the permutation where somebody would get to that point of saying, oh my God, they're raiding the Capitol. They're sieging D.C., in which case we have to take all sorts of action in order to prevent it. But we'll see. But either way, it's coming to a D.C. near you, apparently. With truckers from Canada. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. You're not going to want to miss our next guest, John Kiriakou. He always has a phenomenal story. His life has been utterly astonishing, and it's always interesting to talk to. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. Back in a moment.
Fault Lines. By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life, that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind: color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Pelly, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys just so happen to find yourself in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Austin and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. Our guest, John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou is a former CIA officer, co-host of The Backstory on Radio Sputnik, and author of books including The CIA Insider's Guide to the Crisis or to the Iran Crisis and The Reluctant Spy. John, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Absolutely. Always happy to have you here with us. Always enjoy you.
Always happy.
Thank you.
Always happy to have you on, but not as happy as seeing that jersey on you, because
Pittsburgh Pirates, baby.
You must be an optimistic person if you're a Pirates fan.
I'm trying. We haven't had we've had one winning season since like 1991, but that's okay.
That's painful.
We'll get there.
And by the way, just so we're clear, John is on Political Misfits now. That's 12 to 2.
12 to 2.
Correct.
Yeah, 12 to 2. Don't miss him on that. You guys are going to love John and Michelle Whitty on that spot. But I want to start off with this video. Ned Price. The United States has been making this argument that there's a false flag attack that Russia is planning in order to create a pretext to attack Ukraine. Now, despite the fact that Russia has been very clear, we don't want to attack Ukraine. We don't want to invade Ukraine. If it's up to us to invade Ukraine, Ukraine is not going to get invaded. However, we have security concerns that you need to pay attention to. And so the U.S. is now saying, initially, the attack was imminent. They stepped back when the attack was imminent. Ukraine has basically been saying, will you calm down on that stuff? Meaning, the country that the U.S. has said is about to be attacked is telling the United States to basically calm down on the notion that they're about to be attacked. So Ned Price goes out, and Ned Price is giving a statement, and he's basically arguing about this kind of false flag thing. A reporter asked Ned Price, I believe it was from the AP, Matt Lee, and he just asked them basically, where's your evidence? Listen to Price. He doesn't take this well, and he takes umbrage at anybody even just asking him for the most basic of evidence. Basically being a journalist. Let's play the clip.
Okay, well, that's quite a mouthful there. So you said actions such as these suggest otherwise. Suggest meaning they suggest they're not interested in talks and they're going to go ahead with some kind of a... What action are you talking about?
One, the actions I've just pointed to. The fact that Russia continues to engage in disinformation campaigns.
You made an allegation that they might do that. Have they actually done it?
What we know, Matt, is what I have just said, that they have engaged in this activity, in this planning activity. But let me because obviously this is not the first time we've made these reports public. You'll remember that just a few weeks ago.
I'm sorry, made what report public?
If you'll let me finish, I will tell you what report we made public. We told you a few weeks ago that we have information indicating Russia also has already prepositioned a group of operatives to conduct a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine. So that, Matt, to your question, is an action that Russia has already taken.
It's an action that you say that they have taken, but you have shown no evidence to confirm that. And I'm going to get to the next question here, which is, what is the evidence that they I mean, this is like crisis actors, really? This is like Alex Jones territory you're getting into now. What evidence do you have to support the idea that there is some propaganda film in the making?
Matt, this is derived from information known to the U.S. government, intelligence information that we have declassified. I think you know.
Okay, well, where is it? Where is this information?
It is intelligence information that we have declassified.
Well, where is it? Where's the declassified information?
I just delivered it.
But, no, you made a series of allegations and statements.
Would you like us to print out the topper? Because you will see a transcript of this briefing that you can print out for yourself.
That's not evidence, Ned. That's you saying it. That's not evidence. I'm sorry.
What would you like, Matt?
I would like to see some proof that you that you can show that
Matt, you have been
that shows that the Russians are doing this. Ned, I've been doing this for a long time.
I know, that was my point. You have been doing this for quite a while. You know that when we declassify intelligence information, we do so in a means. We do so with an eye to protecting sources and methods.
Is not going to fall. I remember a lot of things. So where is the declassified information other than you coming out here and saying?
Matt, I'm sorry you don't like the format, but we have declassified.
It's not the format; it's the content.
I'm sorry you don't like the content. I'm sorry you are doubting the information that is in the possession of the U.S. government.
No,
what I'm telling you is that this is information that's available to us. We are making it available to you in order for a couple reasons. One is to attempt to deter the Russians from going ahead with this activity. Two, in the event we're not able to do that, in the event the Russians do go ahead with this, to make it clear as day, to lay bare the fact that this has always been an attempt on the part of the Russian Federation to fabricate a pretext.
Yeah, but you don't have any evidence to back it up other than what you're saying. It's like you're saying, we think we have information the Russians may do this, but you won't tell us what the information is. And then when you're asked...
That is the idea behind deterrence, Matt. That is the idea behind deterrence. It is our hope that the Russians don't go forward with this.
Is, you say, I just gave it to you. But that's not what...
You seem not to understand. You seem not to understand the idea of deterrence. We are trying to deter the Russians from moving forward with this type of activity. That is why we're making it public today. If the Russians don't go forward with this, that is not... ipso facto, an indication that they never had plans to do so.
But then it's unprovable. I mean, my God, what is the evidence that you have that suggests that the Russians are even planning this?
Matt,
I'm not saying that they're not, but you just come out and say this and expect us just to believe it without you showing a shred of evidence that it's actually true. Other than when I ask, or when anyone else asks, what's the information? You said, well, I just gave it to you, which was just you making a statement.
Matt, you said yourself, you've been in this business for quite a long time. You know that when we make information, intelligence information public, we do so in a way that protects sensitive sources and methods. You also know that we declassify information only when we're confident in that information. If you doubt the credibility of the U.S. government, of the British government, of other governments, and want to find solace in information that the Russians are putting out, that is for you to do.
I'm not asking what the Russian government is putting out, and what is it supposed to mean?
And then he moves on. He doesn't want to deal with it from that point. That is astonishing clip. What a petty, cantankerous little man. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's basically being asked on the issue of war and peace, hey, where's your evidence?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Where's my evidence? I gave you my evidence. No, you gave me a statement that somebody was doing something. That is evidence. No, that's not evidence. That's decidedly not evidence.
And we declassified it. Yeah. Okay. If you declassified it, where can I find it?
Where can I find it?
I just told you.
Yeah, I just gave it to you.
It's
I can print out a transcript.
Yeah. I can print out a transcript of this meeting, of this conversation.
Which means you're admitting that my evidence is exactly what I just said.
Yeah. That's astonishing, right? It's almost as if he's thinking to himself, well, when the State Department makes a statement, that is evidence of something. That's not evidence of anything. That's just evidence that you just made a statement.
That's right.
And they're asking him very specific. He's not even saying, that you're wrong. He's just saying, where's your evidence of this? And dude is like losing it. He melts down. He starts to attack the guy. He's like, well, I mean, if you just want to take the Russian point of view. It's like, what are you talking about, Russian point of view? Yeah, take
solace in the Russian media.
How weird is that? You've worked for the CIA.
Yes.
And you know for yourself that sometimes they would put out reports that are barely credible, maybe not credible at all, because they want to push the media space into a certain point of view, or an administration wants to put the media space into a certain point of view or have certain conversations. It doesn't necessarily, that's not indicative of it being true. It's indicative of them just putting it out. Somebody put a report somewhere.
There's a lot of garbage that's put out as intelligence.
Exactly.
Right? And this exchange.
What are your thoughts on this? I love that.
It brings to mind two things. First of all, this is something that the intelligence community has done for a very long time. They'll throw a grenade into the middle of the room and they'll say, take my word for it, because if you could see the intelligence that I can see, then you would know, this is the truth, right?
Trump was totally working with the Russians.
Yeah, we're just supposed to take their word for it.
Yeah, right.
Like we were supposed to take their word for Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, for example, for everything that that this crazy Kurdish source told, what was his name? Curveball.
Yes.
Told the German intelligence. We just take their word for it, right? Because it's true. But in fact, human intelligence is the least reliable intelligence that's out there. Now, I don't know if this is human intelligence, but it sounds like it. And that leads me to my second point. What the State Department spokesman is talking about is called a terror line. They'll get the intelligence community, and when I say intelligence community, really, this all comes from the CIA.
Right.
So the CIA will come up with some intelligence report, and it says the Russians are going to do a false flag operation. So what they do is they rewrite it. So on a clear, not clear, but on a blank white piece of paper with no headers and footers. So it doesn't say to CIA headquarters from this secret station out in the field, attention, director, deputy director. None of that stuff's on there. It's just a blank piece of paper. And they take out any identifying information that happens to be in the original report. So it may say secret source AB Grasshopper said that the Russians are going to do a false flag operation. They take everything out, so it just says Russians are going to do a false flag.
I see.
And then they tear it off. That's why it's called a terror line. You physically tear it off, and you give it to the that's my stupid watch.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking to it.
Like, am I hearing this in my head? I'm sorry.
You give it to the State Department spokesman, and he reads it, and he says to the media, the Russians are doing a false flag.
Yeah.
Well, newsflash, this stupid State Department spokesman barely has a security clearance anyway, so he doesn't know what the reporting is.
Yeah.
He's never seen the original report. For him to even decide, okay, this is legit, or this is not legit, it's from some nut in, South Africa who doesn't have any idea what the Russians are saying behind closed doors.
Yeah, he can't do it. He doesn't have that insight one way or the other.
No, and because he doesn't, we don't.
Right.
But again, we're just supposed to take his word for it.
Yeah,
and that's why he got so
shouldn't
angry.
we be able to see the redacted tear-off then?
Yes, exactly. See, now this is another problem, is it's a tear line. And being a tear line makes it automatically unclassified. They should have printed off copies and handed them out to everybody when they walked into the room.
Yeah.
They have every right to see the declassified version.
And that's what I said. If they had it, they would have been mailing that stuff off to anybody that would look at it. I mean,
absolutely.
Because he wouldn't be standing out here basically by himself saying, take my word for it.
Also, it wouldn't take very much effort to still push out what they're trying to do, right?
No.
If they said, hey, John, I need you to write this thing for me. Okay, what do you need? Just say these things, that Russia's planning this invasion and false flag, and just do it. I mean, we're taking off all the vital information anyway.
Right.
You don't have to be in Ukraine to write that. And then they can just say, hey, no identifying.
See, but
ipso facto. But they didn't even do that.
They won't even do that. Exactly. I wrote a tear line once. I went to this clandestine meeting. And this thing lasted for hours. And it was in the middle of the night. And it's out in the sticks someplace. So I drive back to the embassy, and I'm sitting there for hours writing it up, and it's going for page after page after page. The source told me this. The source told me that. It was just page after page. And in the very end, he said, he was sitting in a bar 2 weeks ago, and he heard some guy say, what we should do? We should put a bomb in Times Square. Okay. I said to him, who was it? He said, I don't know. I said, well, what were the circumstances? What did he say? He was just some punk. He looked to be 18 years old. He's probably an anarchist just spouting off.
And you sat there and wrote the entire thing up.
Wow. I had to write it up. It's like 10, 12, 15 pages long.
Yeah.
I sent it to headquarters. And I said, by the way, check out the last paragraph. It's likely nothing. Next thing I know, New York City's going on lockdown. Right? Because they made a terror line.
Yeah.
A source says they're going to bomb Times Square.
And that was it. That was enough.
That was enough. And the State Department's like, oh, my God, they're going to bomb Times Square. It's like, wait a minute. That's not what he said.
There's no evaluation on, the credibility of a particular
Not
case?
on a terror line.
Okay.
Because they're afraid it's going to somehow point to the original source.
I know,
Which
but
I get. You have to protect your sources.
Right.
I get that, but shouldn't the gravity of what's being said be measured and evaluated?
It should. And I argue that it should be measured and evaluated in the terror line.
Agreed.
So it wouldn't point to the source to say the source heard a rumor.
Right.
A human source. You don't even have to say what country it came from or anything. A human source heard a rumor that, and then just lay it out.
Even if you get a numerical value where 10 means this is a flat fact going to happen, 7 means like even if you give it something, just something to measure the gravity of whatever that particular thing is. Because otherwise you get Ned Price here basically coming out here saying this stuff.
Yeah.
And with nobody having any real clue about the legitimacy of what he's saying or even the gravity of it. For all I know, Ned Price wants a political position and is using this as a way of kind of getting to that particular political position,
Well,
which is what I
that's
suspect.
an important point. And I'll add something to it. Time was when I first started at the CIA, and now I'm embarrassed to even say it, I'm talking 32 years ago. The sourcing would be far more specific.
Yeah.
So you could say a reliable source, which meant that the source had been polygraphed and had passed the polygraph, okay? Or that he had provided reliable information for more than 10 years. And you've been able to vet and prove that what he said was true.
Yeah.
You can have an untested source, meaning he hasn't been polygraphed. You could have a source identified as a walk-in. That's just some guy who just walked in off the street, told you something, you gave him $100 and he walked out.
Just like the Bin Laden thing, right?
Like Bin Laden. We used to have walk-ins every flipping day.
Yeah.
Every single day. You can have a foreign government service, which is a foreign intelligence. There are all different ways to describe, to identify the source. In this case, even if you're not going to identify the veracity of the source, at least tell us where he came from.
Yeah.
You know, if this is a walk-in who walked into the American embassy in Tokyo, for example, or, Canberra, and said, hey, the Russians are going to do this false flag, then I think the American people are owed that information where they can come to their own conclusion as to whether or not this is information worth considering.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell us where the source came from.
Yeah. We're going to keep hitting this all through the show, so if you're listening, don't worry, that's not the end of it, but we do have a host of other issues to talk about with John here. So this last question I will ask that comes from a viewer about this. Isn't this an American false flag?
That's a great question. That is a great question, and it very well could be. And 10 years ago, I would have said no. Today, I say yes, because in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, signed into law by Barack Obama, that great freedom-loving president, the United States is now allowed to propagandize its own people.
National Defense Authorization Act was
yes.
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is yes, this could be an American false flag. Yes.
Legally.
Maybe not even with the primary goal of propagandizing the American people, but of providing disinformation to the Russians.
Interesting.
Because the Russians are going to say, like, whoa, wait a minute. We have a source inside the Russian government who's reporting to the United States that we're planning this false flag.
Yeah.
If there really is a false flag.
See, I took it as Ned Price wants, it's almost like you want to imply your opponent is about to do something that you're doing.
Yes.
It's like that thing, like almost like seeding the
projection.
ground. Because that's why he kept saying, it's like, well, we're just trying to prevent it. We're just trying to prevent it. We're just trying to prevent it.
Yeah.
Meaning whether it's true or not is almost secondary to the point of them basically like putting that out there.
Yes.
And, it's like, it's just very strange. And it comes across almost amateurish in a weird way. I mean, this is very light pressing. I mean, this is not like the guy wasn't yelling at Ned.
No, he was very respectful.
Yeah, he was very respectful.
Never raised his voice.
Yeah, and Ned just couldn't take it. I mean, he just losing it. It like flipped out. And it also gets to
the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Get out of the kitchen. And it also gets to this thing of how they've become so accustomed to not getting pushback. Like, the very act of somebody asking a critical question, Ned is not accustomed to that. Clearly, he's not accustomed to it. And so he's not handling that well.
Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs. He's not used to being challenged.
Right. Man, I love your analysis of that. That's on point, especially since you have the experience where you can kind of explain the other items around it. So one of the other stories that we wanted to hit has to do with the Pegasus. Basically, intelligence in the United States has access to Pegasus. Pegasus was this Israeli program that was pretty voracious in its ability to kind of break into systems, software systems. The FBI is basically saying we had it because we needed to pay attention to it.
Well, first off, Israeli government first said we had it. Of course, we developed it, essentially. And we used it on our citizens. So that first came out. Then the FBI said, okay, yeah, we had it in our possession. But no way we would ever actually use that investigation. It's like, when you have a very dangerous weapon, we have it just to make sure we fully understand it. But it is probably like, I imagine the FBI before having it, we're just salivating over the fact like, oh my God, we should get this.
Do you remember the FBI director that Trump fired? What's his name? Comey. Comey was director when we had that terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California. And the guy was communicating with his co-conspirator through some video game. Which the FBI never occurred to them to, intercept our children's
it's like you're playing Xbox and you're sending a message like, go bomb this place.
But they confiscated his iPhone. And Apple encryption is so good that the FBI just couldn't crack the iPhone. Remember this? This is like 4 years ago or so. They just couldn't crack the iPhone. And then Comey made a comment later that people would faint if they knew what the FBI had to spend to hire Israeli hackers to finally get into the iPhone.
Oh, Pegasus, is that what they were talking about?
I think that they were talking about an early version of Pegasus.
Wow, that is amazing.
That would make sense because it's a no-click.
It was.
Right.
It's a non-click bug.
Yeah.
And I know that Apple is famous. I won't even say notorious. It's good for Apple to be protecting of privacy.
Yes.
No, we won't give you the passwords. We won't let you break in. So they have to hit that level of malware to break into a phone. That is
wow. That's impressive.
I think that was the genesis of this entire thing.
Because I remember this.
And Austin, we've had these reports that the Hungarians bought it, the Poles bought it. They're cracking down. The Turks, they're cracking down on dissidents. They're looking at political adversaries. Everybody's getting tapped now because of this doggone program.
So do you think this is like the U.S. funding gain-of-function research in China, essentially, where the U.S. funded this project with Israel?
I do.
Wow.
I wouldn't put it past
Waiting for that report to come out.
That's that report, for example. This was when they were doing. The U.S. was working with Israel in order to create a program that would basically get onto Iranian computers and screw up their. Basically, it would give false readings for the nuclear centrifuges and whatnot.
And it would make the gyroscopes spin out of control and then destroy themselves.
Right. And then that ends up getting into the internet by accident. Obama gets the message, and Obama's like, do they know yet? I mean, that book is amazing when they're going into the White House being told that, okay, look, this plan that you guys had to destroy the Iranian centrifuges are out. And Obama's just saying, okay, well, we'll just deal with it. Yeah. And then the virus eventually dies after a certain period of time. People were studying it. And so, I can't put it past them that we wouldn't be working with them to do something like that. That's amazing. Really good point. One of the other issues have to do with the Iran deal. As I read, you wrote the book on Iran in this very specific situation, and I'll just read it. The Biden administration expects Iran to be able to amass enough materials to produce a nuclear weapon in less than a year, even if the 2015 agreement among Washington and Tehran and 5 other nations is revised according to a new report. It says the White House officials concluded late last year that Iran's nuclear program was too far advanced to roll back and so-called quote-unquote breakout period to 12 months specified in the original deal negotiated by the Obama administration, reported by the Wall Street Journal on Thursday. And so basically, Trump pulls us out of the JCPOA. Iran,
which was working, by the way.
Which was working. And in this weird impotence, it almost like the Ukraine is almost similar in this sense, where Russia is basically taking an action and showing that all of these systems that all of these people thought over the course of time period didn't exactly work in the way that you thought that was going to work. Meaning, in Russia taking an action, the U.S. and its Western powers are basically standing idle, not really having a good solution to deal with it. And same thing with Iran in this case. You had a JCPOA. Trump pulls out of the JCPOA in order to ratchet up pressure. You get a hardline government comes in response to it. And that hardline government is like, well, fine, you pulled out of this. We didn't pull out of this. Right. We were standing to the deal. We stood with that deal for a whole year after you guys pulled out. And now they've started to increase the fission material or whatever they're going to use for it. And the U.S. is standing there like, yeah, we can't stop them now. That is comical. Like, that's so comically inept.
And it shows you the damage that Donald Trump's decision to pull us out did. You know, this was the same modus operandi that we used through the United Nations to monitor Iraqi sites, right? Same cameras, same lead seals on the doors of the facilities. Inspectors were free to come and go as necessary. It was working, and the Iranians were respecting it. One thing that a lot of people forget is about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, it was at the very end of the Obama administration, the CIA wrote a national intelligence estimate, which is a sense of the community publication. Okay. Every member of the intelligence community signs off on a national intelligence estimate. And
it's like, this is our point of view of whatever this particular issue is.
Of the entire community. And they concluded that the Russians were not interested in an offensive nuclear capability.
Yes.
They were not. And so do they have the capability to put something together in a year? Sure they do. That's on us. Yeah. Because we walked away from the deal. But do they want to, and do they intend to? I don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, we used to hear a lot from Benjamin Netanyahu that the Iranians have to be stopped at any expense. They're going to attack Israel with nuclear weapons. There was never any indication that that was the case.
Yeah.
Never.
And he's been saying it for 20 years?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been coming out, like, he drew a picture of a bomb.
And he dragged George W. Bush to the brink of war with Iran and did the same thing at the beginning of the Trump administration. Yeah, and there was never any indication that the Iranians intended to use or even had a weapon to use. And even if they had a weapon, and we used to say this about the Iraqis all the time, they had no delivery system.
Yeah. It seemed to be purely defensive in nature.
Purely defensive. Else, You can't, like, just tie it onto the bottom of a plane and fly to Israel and then, you know, with the scissors cut it off. You can't do that.
You would think that there would be people who were bright enough to know that. And instead, what we get is this kind of fear-mongering to the American public about all of these people are enemies, all of these people are trying to do this and that. And it's like, when you delve into it, it's far more complicated than that.
It always is.
It's not even true.
That's right. It's always complicated.
Wow. One more thing. There was something else. Go for it.
So, Idlib.
Right.
Yeah. The op that U.S. Special Forces confirmed yesterday morning, very bright and early. Supposedly, and no, this is reporting from the ground of the people that live there, not the U.S. The U.S. came in on helicopters. They hovered for about 2 hours prior.
Which is just nuts,
That's so weird. Yeah, that's so
saying
bizarre.
Over loudspeakers, like, any women and children, please leave the house.
Yeah.
Essentially, we're going to go in and kill people.
Yeah.
Get out if you're not exactly who we want to kill.
If you don't want to be murdered, leave now.
They went in and killed 13 people. Well, not killed 13 people necessarily. There were 13 casualties.
Yes.
None U.S.
Yes.
They were unable to fly another helicopter out, so they had to blow up that tech.
Right.
So it wouldn't get into their hands. So the whole question of all this becomes Idlib. Why is it such a hotbed?
Yeah.
Is there a resurgence we're going to see for terrorists? And how can we fight that? How can we get ahead of it? I know that I'm giving you, like, a whole bunch to really
those
attack
are very
here.
Difficult questions.
Yeah.
We've been protecting Idlib.
Idlib is, you know, I get the same vibe.
Yeah. I mean, because when Russia was saying they were going to take it, the U.S. flips out.
Yeah, like, no, you can't do that.
No, you can't do that. It was like Syria and Russia were about to take the territory. And it was like, oh, you can't do that. We're going to go to war.
Is it more in the U.S. interest to essentially keep Idlib? Because it's, let's say it's a U.S. territory at this point.
It gives us a reason to stay there.
Yes.
Right?
Right. But then it also, like, if we have a definitive territory that we don't need approval to just go in and do ops in, that is also confirmed a hotbed of terrorists makes it very easy to go in,
totally.
whenever we want.
Totally. And remember, this house, they told us yesterday, this house that Abu Ibrahim was in was 2 miles from the Turkish border.
That close.
2 miles. You can see Turkey from this house.
Wow.
Right? So you would think that this would be easy. You just roll tanks across the border. You take it, you wipe the place out, you arrest all the bad guys, and you turn it over to the Kurds and they can run it.
Yeah.
Why haven't we done that? I think it's for the reason that you're alluding to.
Yeah.
I mean, even the UN said there were like 10, 20,000 terrorists in Idlib.
I mean, at the very least, this was a successful op, whether or not we shot him or he blew himself up.
Yeah. Which they've done in the past. Baghdadi, before we killed him, when we sent commandos in to get him, he blew himself up too. Al-Qaeda generally doesn't do that, but ISIS does. They'll blow themselves up. Yeah. The fact that he blew up his wives and his children is kind of
but that's
not cool.
I mean, those special forces are going out on a kill order, right? I mean, their primary goal isn't to like
they were not trying to capture him.
It's purely
no.
Right. So at the very least, and I say this facetiously, we're done with the leader of ISIS, right? There is no more leader of ISIS right now.
No, I'm sure that by the end of the day today, there's going to be a brand new leader.
The king is dead. Long live the king. Yeah.
This is another. I made kind of a bad joke yesterday on my own show that there were more number 3s in Al-Qaeda than you could shake a stick at.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I became famous inside the CIA for supposedly capturing the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. Well, he wasn't the number 3. He wasn't even in Al-Qaeda.
Oh, wow.
He was a bad guy, certainly.
Right.
But there were, 20 number 3s that came after him. And it's the same with ISIS.
Yeah. There's always another person.
Always. There's always another person.
It's like Obama asking, why is the queue list getting longer?
What's fostered this whole resurgence of, let's say, recruitment into ISIS and other terrorist groups right now?
The media want us to believe that it's because we have been drawing down in the region. I don't buy that for 1 second. I always maintain that it's far more complicated than this. I think that if we supported true economic development and education, we wouldn't have a terrorism problem to deal with.
Great.
I captured dozens of Al-Qaeda fighters, dozens, and interrogated twice as many. And they all told the same story. They all were young men from some isolated village in their country. They were almost universally illiterate, not religious at all, because they couldn't read. They couldn't read the Quran. They didn't know the prayers. Yeah. They couldn't get married because no man would want his daughter to marry somebody who can't read and write and has no job prospects. And so the local imam said to them, "What are you doing in this village? You should go to Afghanistan and make jihad against the Americans. And we'll give you $500 a month. And if you're martyred, we'll give your parents a $500 martyrdom bonus."
Wow.
Well, they got nothing else to do. They have no future in this village. So they fly to Afghanistan. They don't have any beef against the Americans until we drone their village and kill their cousin and their grandfather. And, that's a whole separate issue. But they did this because they had nothing else to do. Well, if we had spent, the $1 trillion that we've spent on these endless wars on things like roads and hospitals and airports and, clean water facilities, like the Chinese are doing in all of these countries, we wouldn't have this terrorism problem.
John, thank you, my man. I always appreciate these conversations.
Good to talk to you both.
Absolutely. The voice that you guys were listening to is John Kiriakou. He's a former CIA officer, co-host of Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, and author of books including The CIA Insider's Guide to the Iran Crisis and The Reluctant Spy. You can follow John on Twitter at John Kiriakou and learn more about him at johnkiriakou.com. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. Back in a moment.
Fault Lines.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Pelly, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. We are taking your calls. This is going to be an open segment. We have about 9 minutes, give or take. The number is 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Great segment. John is fascinating. Like, the life that he's lived and the things that he's been involved in is just shocking.
Yeah, John, as you guys didn't see, but as he's leaving the studio, he's telling us another story.
Yeah.
John always has a better story.
Yes.
Just because, I don't know, he's lived 8 times the lifetimes I could even ever imagine. So he's always a great interview, always a good discussion.
And always fascinated by what he's telling me.
Always a good discussion.
Yeah. Transition.
We got Tarif on the line. Tarif calling in from New Orleans. Tarif, what's on your mind, man?
Thank you for taking my call, gentlemen. I have 4 comments. First, I'd like to say free drilling science, free Dunginger, and hashtag no more. First comment is dealing with the drilling science organization, WikiLeaks. They came out with they're working with the Mirror Pact to come out with an NFT, NFT, non-fungible token. They already raised about $2.3 million already before they release it next week. That's good. They're going to raise money for his legal fees and other things. Trucker convoy, they can talk, still communicating, even though they're getting banned off of different platforms through the CBs and the trucker stations. They can talk through that. That's how they can spread through which way they can go and protest, whether they go to D.C. or New York or whatever. Third comment, I have to go back over this again. When I saw reports coming out of and reading reports coming out of northern Syria about the incident that took place, yes, they got the terrorists, but what wasn't said was the witnesses on the ground said that they was launching missiles into that house. They was hitting that house with machine gun fire and missiles. That wasn't brought up because if you say it was hitting the house with missiles, then it kind of changed the narrative that. No, did he blow himself up, or was he blown up by a missile? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I see.
I know he's a terrorist, but you got children. They're bringing it down to just 3 children, but the total number of children was dead was 6.
Right. Yeah. I did see that part. That there were 6 kids that had basically died nearby. I mean, yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, it's very strange. The last time around, the U.S. got so much pushback on when it killed all those kids and women in that last attack where they were basically a retaliation for the suicide bombing that took place in Afghanistan at the airport. And so I don't know if that's the reason they did it that way, where it's like, okay, so we're going to hang for 2 hours. We're going to, put out all these announcements and everything else. But to your point, Tarif, it's like, what's the reality of events on the ground? And
the reality is at the same time, I'm totally talking subjective here, but I don't think that all of those kids who wanted to get out or women who wanted to get out were allowed to get out.
Yeah.
So, that puts another story to it. And, I mean, if he was found with a vest on but blown up, I don't know. I mean, it raises a good question of was it a missile or was it the vest? At the very least, you could say he had the intention to blow himself up if he was wearing the vest.
Also, it feels like if you spend 2 hours hanging around, basically telling people to leave, you're less inclined to just kind of fire missiles into the place. But again, I don't know. That stuff is all taking place.
Tarif, you had a couple other comments, correct?
Yeah, I had one more comment, but I'm not making this up. I'm just going by what the Al Jazeera reporter said that the witnesses told him. That's what I saw on the internet. Okay, my last comment, and also the guy from RT Underground was covering it too. But anyway, my last comment is dealing with the China-Russian Relations Joint Declaration. Pepe Escobar printed it out today. China and Russia is against NATO expansion, favors UN justice in international relations, will fight interference in the international affairs of floor, sovereign countries, against color revolutions, oppose eternal forces, undermining national security. That's also saying against regime change and color revolutions, and also last against color revolutions, basically. And also sign another deal with the second pipeline that they're going to create for another 10 billion cubic meters of natural gas. So basically, China got Russia's back, and is an agreement between Russia and them to have no limits on the partnership now. That means if the U.S. try to sanction Russia, China got Russia back 100%. They're not going to listen to the U.S. by saying, they got to abide by the sanctions. No, they're going to really help Russia. They're going to help them in all sectors. So there you go.
Yeah. Tarif, thank you for the call. We are taking more calls, 202-521-1320. And something I do want to address, we were planning on today hitting the Freedom Convoy. We haven't been able to actually secure that interview. We're going to try for the beginning of next week. So if you want to call and talk about it, we would love to hear the conversation. I was very interested in it. As you heard the first hour, I'll be on the streets of D.C. if it comes here.
That's right.
Feel free to call in about it this hour or the next hour. As far as what we just heard from Tarif, yeah, if Russia finds that fighting NATO on their own is too hard, USSR is dissolved.
Yes.
Could we see a new... Give me another... give me another name. I don't want to say USSR, but a new...
I love Dragon Bear.
Soviet communist-linked...
Yeah. Some kind of
party,
Sino-Soviet or Sino-Russian pact or something like that.
China, Russia, and North Korea.
Yeah. Well, I think it would probably be China, Russia, Iran, Syria, North Korea, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe. Probably. If we keep going the way we're going, the world is bifurcating. It just seems that way. even take out all of this. Even when things were going relatively well between the U.S. and Russia, let's say the Obama administration, he was still trying to do the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that was going to break up trade between basically, let's say, the U.S. region of the world versus the Chinese region of the world, meaning they were still going towards that bifurcation of the world, even before all of this kind of kicked off. So it seems like they were going in that direction. I got to be honest, like I said before, if I am head of China, if I'm head of Russia, that is a partnership, not just of convenience, but it's also a partnership of necessity. It's like if you are in a conflict and you have...
Really? You think Russia and China need each other?
Yes, I do. Okay. Especially in this particular scenario where you have the U.S., you have the Western allies associated with it, you have countries like NATO. And those countries,
let's explain it.
Yeah, and those countries have basically put all sorts of pressure on both. The U.S. has basically been saying that they've committed genocide. They've been attacking Russia left and right on pretty much anything that goes on in the world. And so it's like both of those two countries are there together. What are they going to do? If one country goes belly up, then the other country is basically dealing with all that on their own by themselves.
Well, okay. Feel free to push back. But I think that Russia could handle the EU. Just the EU.
Anything can handle the EU. That's not difficult.
Okay, yeah. I don't necessarily just mean like that conglomerate. I mean that Russia could handle all those countries separately.
Yeah.
Even if they're all not physically attacking. Yeah. But like any issues between the two, Russia could say like, you are so dependent on our energy production that it's never going to boil over to something. The U.S. is a little bit of a crying toddler to where it makes things sticky. And then we also add this economic issue as well, because everyone wants to be sanctions, which we're super ready for. So that's where I'm like, do Russia and China need each other just on this world stage? I don't know. I think China can handle the U.S.
Let me ask you this.
On its own.
Do you think that the U.S. needs its allies for other issues around the globe?
Posturing against the opposition that we are right now of Russia and China, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
On the everyday, the other places that we love to impose ourselves, like the Middle East, I don't think we need our allies for that.
Okay.
Because we like to throw our weight around in the Middle East.
Yeah, but we often throw our weight around with those allies as we're doing it. They always bring along people with them. It's like the unilateral stuff is stuff that people frown upon. But I accept your point. I totally accept your point. You guys are listening to Fault Lines, Thomas and Pelly. We're going to be back for the last hour of the show. Fault Lines, Thomas and Pelly, back in a moment.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from the divided states of America, fixated between the ever-expanding rift on our collective ideology. I'm your political analyst fighting for the right, Austin Pelly.
And in the left corner, I am your indefatigable, your ever-vigilant, your last man on the wall, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
That means that you were listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. Jamarl, you didn't say it today.
The what?
And in the left, well, ish.
Yeah, because it breaks it up. I always, like I said, I always have this difficulty of saying, yes, I'm fighting for X or fighting for Y. It feels like you're chained to it.
Well, then, if you don't want to break it up, you can just, like, inflect your voice, then say, like, and fighting for the left. I'm Jamarl Thomas.
They can totally get that. Everybody was like, okay, yeah, I know what he's trying to get at when he says that.
Yeah, I mean, RT right now is reporting false flag fabrication, which we'll get to in a second.
Right? A false flag about a false flag.
Yeah?
Yeah.
False flag fabrication, which we'll get to in a second. We are going to be hitting it every single hour. This is the last hour, so of course, we have to address it for those of you that are just tuning in. Stick around, because this is juicy. But for now, let's get into COVID news. Yesterday in the United States, there were 356,256 new COVID cases reported, along with 2,632 deaths. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 356,849 cases per day, a decrease of 52% from the average 2 weeks ago. 64% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 75% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 75,924,742 people across the US of A and killed 896,183 people. Jamarl, I'm going to ask you a question here. We're at 896,183 deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Let's call them COVID-related deaths. Do you think when we come back on Monday that hits 900,000? We are just shy of 4,000 away.
Yeah. Yes. I'll go with yes.
Because we're on a downward trend, but also there seems to be a lack of numbers after the weekend anyway.
Yeah. This is like on that Monday. So
if
by
you're
Tuesday,
a betting man.
By Tuesday, yes.
I bet my house on this.
Uh-oh.
I'll take the over-under, whatever you pick. So you're saying we hit it?
By Tuesday, yeah.
Okay. I'll bet the shirt on my back.
That's a grim bet. But yeah, I think we get it. On Monday, the numbers are always kind of weird. And so Tuesday, at that point, they reorganize. I mean, we're at 2,600 deaths. We've been at 2,600 for the last 4 days. So.
Yeah, we will see, though, if I go homeless or not. In national news, Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor and 2008 Republican U.S. vice presidential candidate, went to trial against the New York Times on Thursday in a highly anticipated defamation case that could test longstanding protection for American news media. Palin, 57, is suing over a 2017 editorial that incorrectly linked her political rhetoric to a 2011 Arizona mass shooting that left 6 dead and U.S. Representative Gabby Giffords seriously wounded, and which the newspaper later corrected. To win, Palin must offer clear and convincing evidence the Times acted with actual malice, meaning it knew the editorial was false or had reckless disregard for the truth and proceeded to publish it anyway. She's seeking unspecified damages for alleged harm to her reputation. The Freedom Convoy is graduating outside the confines of the Great North. A group of American truckers are seeking to piggyback off of the publicity and momentum of the protest by bringing it to D.C. The protest would include American and Canadian truckers driving from Ottawa to D.C., accruing more members along the way. The Facebook group, which I will not call it a meta group, named Convoy to D.C., amassed more than 100,000 followers in a single day, but has been removed from Facebook for, quote, repeatedly violating community guidelines, unquote. Regardless, the protest is expected to continue next month. In international news, China's Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin of Russia have signed a joint statement calling on the West to, quote, abandon the ideologicized approach of the Cold War, end quote, as the two leaders showcased their warming relationship amid a tense standoff with the West ahead of the Beijing Olympics. In the joint statement released by the Kremlin, Putin and Xi called on NATO to rule out expansion in Eastern Europe, denounced the formation of security blocs in the Asia-Pacific region, and criticized the AUKUS trilateral security pact between the US, UK, and Australia. After the meeting, the pair will attend the Olympic opening ceremony, which is happening right now. Russia has said its closing of Moscow Bureau of German broadcaster Deutsche Welle? I'm going to get roasted again. And revoking staff accreditations in Russia in response to Berlin's ban on the German language channel of Russia State TV network RT. Thursday's announcement comes with tensions mounting between Russia and the West, particularly over fears of a Russian invasion of European ally Ukraine. The move comes after Germany's broadcasting regulator on Wednesday announced it was banning the transmission of the channel RTDE, RT Deutsch, over the lack of a broadcasting license, which is 100% a facade, as we talked with Peter Oliver yesterday. If you haven't seen that, I recommend give you some good context to this broadcasting license violation. Sweden will lift pandemic restrictions next week despite record levels of infections as it banks on booster shots and high rates of past COVID-19 infections to keep hospitalization rates manageable. A number of Sweden's neighbors and fellow European Union members have announced easing of their pandemic rules in the last week. Nightclubs in Denmark are reopening, and the government said it no longer considered COVID a socially critical disease. Norway is dropping its testing requirements for arriving travelers who are fully vaccinated, and Finland has said it would end all of its remaining restrictions this month. In sports news, the Winter Olympics begin today. Occurring right now as the opening ceremony is happening. The ceremony is relatively toned down compared to other years due to the coronavirus. All athletes are currently wearing masks when walking in with their teams. In Earth and Science news, the massive winter storm hit the central, eastern, and southern U.S., has knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. Multiple states have issued emergency warnings, including Indiana, reporting 14.7 inches of snowfall just yesterday. Other states at the top of the snowfall list include Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and Vermont. Stay toasty out there. And in holiday news, today is World Cancer Day, National Create a Vacuum Day, National Quaker Day. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly.
Create a vacuum?
I don't think they mean like a Hoover.
Yeah.
I think like a vacuum is in an isolated.
Like
yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Speaking of, I kind of celebrated. I was a day early.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I just confirmed that I successfully mason jarred sauce.
Okay.
I did it months ago. I did it basically as one of the first meals I made at my new place, which I moved into in October.
Mm-hmm.
I made a big batch of sauce.
Yeah.
And I jarred a lot of it.
What kind of sauce?
Red sauce.
What's red sauce? Oh, just like marinara or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. So the secret is adding bell peppers, like blended bell peppers into it, and it gives a nice.
Okay. And so it's supposed to stay in package for X amount of time or something like that.
So normally if you cook anything, it pretty much has to go in the fridge. So that's because you're introducing bacteria and there's air.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole process about having to seal mason jars and sterilize mason jars. You boil it, you clean it, you boil it, and then it has to you fill it with what you need. You have to leave a little bit of air, but not enough. Then you have to seal it, and then you have to boil it again so it creates a vacuum.
Yeah.
Which is where the story's coming from.
Okay, I see.
And yesterday, we twisted it. That was the first time we've hit the reserves of that sauce. We twisted it, and the lid went pop.
Oh, so that means it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
The vacuum worked. I was not expecting it. It's the first time I'd done it. I looked up a YouTube video on how to do it, and I was very happy with myself.
So how long did you have it basically sitting, waiting for?
October, November, December, January, into February. So about 5 months.
5 months. Okay.
And on a shelf. It wasn't in the fridge.
Yeah. And worked.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I was
very nice.
Back for that.
Now, if Austin is not here on Monday, it is he has been
food poisoning.
Right. Something went wrong. You know why? It's okay, maybe the vacuum didn't work the way we thought the vacuum worked. But no, that's pretty cool, man. Before we go into the thing, I want to play this clip one more time. This is a clip that we've been rather shocked over. Shocked may not be the right word for it, but astonished by. And this is Ned Price. Ned Price gets on the podium and is basically spokesperson for the State Department. And Ned Price is arguing, and that's all he's doing because he's certainly not showing evidence about it, as you're going to see for yourself. But he's arguing that Russia is planning a false flag attack on Ukraine. And when he's asked for the gentlest of asking of, where's your evidence, Ned? Ned has a complete, utter meltdown. Let's play the clip once more.
Okay, well, that's quite a mouthful there. So you said actions such as these suggest otherwise. Suggest meaning they suggest they're not interested in talks and they're going to go ahead with some kind of what action are you talking about?
One, the actions I've just pointed to. The fact that Russia continues to engage in disinformation campaigns.
You made an allegation that they might do that. Have they actually done it?
What we know, Matt, is what I've just said, that they have engaged in this activity, in this planning activity. But let me because obviously this is not the first time we've made these reports public. You'll remember that just a few weeks ago.
I'm sorry, made what report public?
If you'll let me finish, I will tell you what report we made public. We told you a few weeks ago that we have information indicating Russia also has already prepositioned a group of operatives to conduct a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine. So that, Matt, to your question, is an action that Russia has already taken.
It's an action that you say that they have taken, but you have shown no evidence to confirm that. And I'm going to get to the next question here, which is, what is the evidence that they I mean, this is like crisis actors, really? This is like Alex Jones territory you're getting into now. What evidence do you have to support the idea that there is some propaganda film in the making?
Matt, this is derived from information known to the U.S. government, intelligence information that we have declassified. I think you know.
Okay, well, where is it? Where is this information?
It is intelligence information that we have declassified.
Well, where is it? Where's the declassified information?
I just delivered it.
No, you made a series of allegations and statements.
Would you like us to print out the topper? Because you will see a transcript of this briefing that you can print out for yourself.
That's not evidence, Ned. That's you saying it. That's not evidence. I'm sorry.
What would you like, Matt?
I would like to see some proof that you can show that
Matt, you have been
that shows that the Russians are doing this. Ned, I've been doing this for a long time.
I know, that was my point. You have been doing this for quite a while. You know that when we declassify intelligence information, we do so in a means. We do so with an eye to protecting sources and methods.
Is not going to fall. I remember a lot of things. So where is the declassified information other than you coming out here and saying?
Matt, I'm sorry you don't like the format, but we have declassified.
It's not the format; it's the content.
I'm sorry you don't like the content. I'm sorry you are doubting the information that is in the possession of the U.S. government. No, what I'm telling you is that this is information that's available to us. We are making it available to you in order for a couple reasons. One is to attempt to deter the Russians from going ahead with this activity. Two, in the event we're not able to do that, in the event the Russians do go ahead with this, to make it clear as day, to lay bare the fact that this has always been an attempt on the part of the Russian Federation to fabricate a pretext.
Yeah, but you don't have any evidence to back it up other than what you're saying. It's like you're saying, we think we have information the Russians may do this, but you won't tell us what the information is.
And then when you're asked... That is the idea behind deterrence, Matt. That is the idea behind deterrence. It is our hope that the Russians don't go forward with this.
You say, I just gave it to you. But that's not what...
You seem not to understand. You seem not to understand the idea of deterrence. We are trying to deter the Russians from moving forward with this type of activity. That is why we're making it public today. If the Russians don't go forward with this, that is not... ipso facto an indication that they never had plans to do so.
But then it's unprovable. I mean, my God.
I love that.
What is the evidence that you have that suggests that the Russians are even planning this?
Matt,
I'm not saying that they're not, but you just come out and say this and expect us just to believe it without you showing a shred of evidence that it's actually true. Other than when I ask, or when anyone else asks, what's the information? You said, well, I just gave it to you, which was just you making a statement.
Matt, you said yourself, you've been in this business for quite a long time. You know that when we make information, intelligence information public, we do so in a way that protects sensitive sources and methods. You also know that we declassify information only when we're confident in that information. If you doubt the credibility of the U.S. government, of the British government, of other governments, and want to find solace in information that the Russians are putting out, that is for you to do.
I'm not asking what the Russian government is putting out, and what is it supposed to mean?
Yeah, and then he moves on. That's so embarrassing. Like, I don't know if Ned Price realizes how pathetic that is. You're basically asked a very basic question, where's the evidence? And then you have a full meltdown. And even go so far as to basically attack the guy. I love that last part, he says, ipso facto, it doesn't mean that they were never planning on doing it. To which the reporter quickly assesses, well, wait a minute, that means you're basically saying that if it didn't happen, it didn't necessarily mean they weren't planning for it to happen. Oh, right, so that means that we have no evidence one way or the other. Well, I mean, I just told you. It's like, do you need me to get a transcript of me just saying this here? Would that be enough for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is sad.
I'm going to go back to this in 1 second. But so the torch lighting is happening right now, which I'm going to revisit in 1 second. Yeah. The key thing for me of that quote, of that clip, was him saying, well, you're obviously not familiar with the aspect of deterrence.
Yeah.
So you're admitting then, okay, so then the U.S.'s policy for deterring another country invading or whatever, as long as it's within our interest, is to make up lies. Which I mean, at this
Ned
point,
is trying to say that this is
at this point, I'm kind of going to call it a lie until you show some real evidence. Is to make the de facto is to make up lies in order to spook the American public and prep the American military arm, even more so, to deter them from going in.
Well, see, I took deterrence in that case as, well, we've exposed this plot, and because we've exposed this plot,
do it anymore.
They can't do it anymore. That's the way I took it, that he meant deterrence. By the same token, though, it's like, but dude, if you're not showing us any evidence on this, how do you know that plot was there in the first place? Like, you're basically saying, okay, they're planning on doing this. Okay, say it never happens. Well, he tried to justify that too. Well, I mean, just because it didn't happen doesn't necessarily mean they weren't planning it. To the reporter's point, but dude, certainly we need some evidence to show that this was even in the works. And you're basically now saying this is unprovable one way or the other. I mean, it's just a very weird case. Look, I would say, again, this reporter did God's work. If your country is escalating kind of a conflict that could lead people to get killed, then this is exactly what you want those people to do. And if you notice, he kind of made this point too. I was around during weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, where they breathlessly lied to us that these guys had weapons of mass destruction. Or for that matter, I was around during Kabul is not going to fall. Kabul is not going to fall, meaning this was even in the Obama administration. Biden. I was around during Trump and Russia, where they went for 3 years basically putting a psyop on the American public. His point is apt. No, I am not going to take your word for it. There is no reason for me to just take your word for it. And like anything else, if you want to put this out, you need to have some level of evidence to back it up. And you just telling me is not the same thing as evidence. Love it.
So this torch lighting ceremony, right now, there's a torch in the middle of this big snowflake. Yeah, speaking of snowflakes. No, there's a big, because it's the winter games. So all of this little lattice in the inside of that are all the names of the countries participating. You see, you got Morocco, Australia, Italy.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
It's cool. And the People's Republic of China is on one side. I'm curious to know where they put the U.S., you know, during all this. I would like to see it. So far, I haven't seen it on there. But the point I want to bring up, but I've said like once or twice on the show before I was actually hosting. That's a Nazi practice.
What? Oh, the flag
torch lighting.
Yeah, the torch lighting. Right.
It symbolized, the Nazis brought it because it symbolized all of this will one day be ours.
Yeah.
And they ran it through from, okay, the Nazis brought it back into the modern era. I don't want people to misquote me.
Yeah.
Yes, the Greeks invented it first, ancient Greeks. Yes, the Nazis brought it back into the modern era when they had the Olympics, because then, and they brought the whole aspect of getting it from Greece and traveling and running it through countries. And that was supposed to symbolize, like, this is as far as our power stretches.
Yeah.
And it's going to go, if we aren't actively occupying, we will very soon.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that Nazi practices live on, you know? It makes me sleep soundly at night.
Like you said, it was Nazis basically took it from somebody else. And I guess you could say
and Marvel's going to take it back.
Marvel's going to take it back. I'm not against this. The thing I like about the Olympics is this kind of interaction between countries that go a little bit beyond politics, where it's like, okay, these countries are just competing in the most straightforward way possible. I hate the fact that politics have basically been enmeshed into the stuff. But here we are. Such is life. Let's go to our guests. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We're going to be back in a moment with Dr. Mikhail Kogan. Mikhail Kogan wrote the book on marijuana, or medicinal marijuana, and he's going to have a conversation about it today, dealing with COVID. Yes. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We'll be back in a moment.
Fault Lines. We are talking
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You are listening.
We give you the most essential out of the endless information space.
Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What do we want?
News, politics, and culture.
When do we want it?
Wait, we weren't finished. News, politics, and culture without the red and blue spin.
Okay, so now when do you want it?
Daily from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, satisfied now?
Never. Tune in to Political Misfits on 105.5 FM in Washington, D.C. and on 102.9 and 104.7 FM in Kansas City, Missouri. Daily for our analytical fix. No surrender.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Pelly, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys just so happen to find yourself in the D.C. area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM at 1390 AM. We're also kicking around in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Austin and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us the like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. As we were having a conversation a while ago, I believe it was maybe a week or so ago, we came across a story that talked about pot having an influence and an effect, positive effect, on people with COVID. Initially, they thought this was just kind of a laboratory effect, but they started seeing this effect even in people outside of a laboratory. And so our guest, Dr. Mikhail Kogan, one of our favorite guests on the show, he joins us all the time. He actually wrote the book, literally, on medicinal marijuana. We had him on the show, one of our best spots with him, actually, talking about it. And so he seemed to be the perfect guest to meld these two things together and in somewhat of a cohesive explanation of COVID's effect, or if that's a matter, marijuana's effect on COVID. And more importantly, or more interestingly, why? To have a conversation about this, we're joined with Dr. Mikhail Kogan. He's medical director at the George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine, associate professor of medicine at George Washington University, and founder and executive director of the AIM Health Institute, a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit delivering integrative services to the vulnerable. To learn more about the AIM Health Institute, visit www.healthaim.org. Dr. Mikhail Kogan, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning?
Good morning. It's so wonderful to be with you guys.
Absolutely. It is wonderful to have you. And yeah, you sent me a text message the other day asking me if I've seen the story. And I did see the story. We hit it. I don't think we brought anybody to talk about it on the air, but I know we were talking about it, and I think we were kind of joking around a bit about it. But you're the perfect person to talk about this because, like I said, you wrote the book on basically medicinal marijuana. What did you think about this in general? I mean, I know this was something that they brought up, but how did they discover this effect? Were they just kind of testing different drugs or different things against COVID, and it just kind of popped up? Or do we know how they discovered this kind of medicinal effect?
Yeah, I don't exactly know how they discovered exactly, but I do know that this information has been beginning to surface actually more than a year ago. So I think the first publication out of Canada showing that CBD may have some possible effects have been now looked into for quite some time. The difference is that the prior study, the one I'm talking about a year ago, more than a year ago, was pretty poorly designed. It was a kind of an attempt to demonstrate something versus this particular study that just came out from, and it came out in one of the most prestigious scientific journals. It's the Journal of National Academies of Sciences, the journal called National Proceedings. And it's coming out of the OSU with the Dr. Bremen as a first author, and it's titled Cannabinoids Block Cellular Entry of SARS-CoV-2 and the Emerging Variants. So what they did is exactly what you just say. So they took a bunch of compounds, and they looked at if you add those compounds to a Petri dish and put the human cells in there, which particular compounds block the entry of the virus into the cell. And turned out, they looked at lots of different cannabinoids, and turned out that the two particular molecules called CBDA, or cannabidiolic acid, and CBGA, as in cannabidiolic acid, have a very potent blocking effect. In fact, so potent that the way I'm reading this, it's translatable to the clinical practice because the degree of blocking was nearly complete and permanent, meaning that the virus couldn't get in even after a period of time. And at that point, virus only can be surviving outside of the cell for so long.
Wow.
Now, it's a little perplexing because the CBDA and CBGA are not the most commonly discussed molecules out there in terms of cannabis, right? We all talk about THC and CBD, and when you guys had me on the show last time and we talked about my book, book covers primarily the most common ways of using cannabis and most common conditions and talks primarily about CBD, THC. But we've covered CBDA specifically in a pretty great length because I have been prescribing it or recommending it for my patients now for almost 10 years. And I found that particularly for chronic pain and particularly for inflammatory pain, so arthritis, of any kind, it's very effective. And so after the study came out, I did something quite unusual. I went and I tried to look at, out of the patients who I've given CBDA as an acid, did anybody get COVID? And none got.
Approximately how many was that?
Well, that's right. So it's not a big sample. It's just over 10 patients. But, they're pretty sick. A lot of them have multiple medical problems. They're older. And I'm going to publish this right away as soon as I can, or if they will let me publish this. And I'm going to look at the bigger sample. I'm going to try to get data from other providers. We're going to try to put it together. And, CBGA is not easy to find. It's available, but you're going to have a hard time finding it. But CBDA as an acid is very easy to find. I use several companies. I don't know if you guys want to hear the names of those. I'm happy to share. I have no problem with that. And they literally, you just buy it online and it gets shipped to your house. So it is not something you need to have a medical card for.
What about the
problem?
Oh, go ahead, please.
The problem here is the dosing. What's not very clear is how to translate the dose exactly and how much should people be taking if they want to experiment. It probably is a pretty high dose. You probably would need to take somewhere between 50 to 100 milligrams of CBDA as an acid per day. And the problem is that at that dose, it's going to be pretty expensive. So the typical current dose for 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams of CBDA, you'd be spending, for 1,500 milligrams, you'd probably be spending 70, 80, maybe even more per month. Hopefully not much more than that. So if you're taking 100 milligrams, you'll be spending $150 to $200 a month. That's significant expense. Mm-hmm. Something that really doesn't have any actual proof, right? So this is in the petri dish. Does that translate to humans? We'll have to see. We'll have to actually collect the data, apply for a randomized or some kind of controlled trial to try to do it. Of course, I don't know if anybody will fund a trial like this since it is not an FDA-approved medication, mm-hmm. And it actually is already on a free market.
Right. So, Dr. Kogan, this question comes from Natalie. Shout out to you, Natalie. She is hypothesizing, she's heard that THC neutralizes the blocking action of CBDA. So I'm wondering if you could talk to that then. So would that mean that, okay, I know hearing this is pretty easy to say, oh, okay, I'm smoking a blunt right now.
Yeah, right. I was about to ask that too. Yeah.
Right. So what is different then in the, let's say the most common way of, getting CBD versus this extract?
So, right. So when I recommend it in the pure form. Well, it's a whole extract, so it's a whole plant extract, but I recommend it just as a CBDA, and not just because I think that the blocking effect of THC is going to be a problem, because you're not going to take that much of THC unless you're a recreational user, which we're not talking about, right? So most people as a recommendation for medical cannabis, the dosing of THC will be 5 to maybe upwards of 20 milligrams. That's kind of pushing it. But most people take just a few milligrams versus the CBDA, the dose here is going to be a lot higher. I don't think that, and also CBDA in the system lasts a bit longer, so THC has a shorter half-life. And the reality is what I'm not very clear is, what is that actual dose? Now, I have to go back and look at all of my patients and try to figure out how much they're actually taking, but that's going to take a while because we have to go back in each chart and try to analyze. And also, could be other reasons why all those patients who been taking CBDA didn't get sick. I mean, it could be all over the place. They could be all vaccinated, and then they're very aggressive at all other preventions because they're so health conscious. So we do need a controlled trial. But so I would say that if you're already taking CBDA for your pain, well, okay, great. So you may want to titrate the dose a little bit higher, I would say, because most people take 20 to 50 milligrams a day in that range. I just try to, what I did is I look at the way they did the study, because they had you can actually find this, the dosing, the concentration has been listed there at how much they used in the Petri dish. And I now try to basically calculate that towards the body weight. That's how I came up with that number, but it's very approximate.
I see.
A lot more complexity goes into a biological system versus a Petri dish.
And just so people can know your book, it's called The Medical Marijuana, Dr. Kogan's Evidence-Based Guide to Health Benefits of Cannabis and CBD. And so I guess the question is...
I want to give a quick update on that. So
please.
We have a soft cover come up in the summer, and we're definitely going to include this study. The publisher is giving us opportunity to do update because the study came out after the book came out. So everything is fast-moving here.
Yeah, and it's right on time. I mean, at the point where you have an illness where, 800, almost 900,000 people would basically have dropped dead from, I mean, to be able to talk about it in the context of the book that you write, it's just phenomenal. It's just great timing. But we don't know as a flat fact whether or not this translates into either smoking or into a person's ingesting it, or do we at this point?
Well, definitely not smoking because you can't smoke that much CBDA, and I don't think you can actually get the CBDA even in inhaled forms. I haven't seen it. So we're basically talking about ingestible forms. The advantage of ingestible forms with CBDA is that acidic forms of cannabinoids are less lipophilic, so they're more water-soluble, so they absorb better. Versus if you take something like THC in an oral form, it will absorb, and it actually will convert in the liver, and it's pretty complicated pharmacology of it. But bottom line, ingestible forms of some cannabinoids not as effective as one may think because bioavailability, absorption is not great. It's less of a problem with the acidic forms.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Kogan, thank you for that segment. If I can shift a little bit here, by the way, for listeners, you can't smoke that much. And Jamarl was like, well, let's see. I'm sure maybe one of you could smoke that much, but that would be a lot. So please just don't try it. Especially if you're driving or planning on being productive at all for the rest of the day. But there's this new study that came out there's an article in the Wall Street Journal citing a study that says that COVID-19 vaccines have been linked to menstrual cycle changes. So I'm wondering, in your practice, have you seen issues with that like arise in the everyday, or is it too early to tell, or what have you seen?
Well, actually, I have. Interesting you mentioned, and we've actually been seeing this for quite some time. We didn't understand what to say about this until the study came out, and I'm guessing the study came out because other physicians were seeing that as well. Now, I'm definitely seeing this very little just because my practice is primarily older adults, so after menopause. But I have seen some of my patients state that to me, and I simply could, we could say, well, yeah. I think I also expecting, to be honest with you guys, that we're going to see more studies coming out like this. We're going to see other side effects popping up and documented and published, and we'll see the magnitude of those side effects. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. I know that it's a little early to hypothesize on this, but it showed that cycles were extended on average by less than a day after one vaccine dose, or up to 2 days for people who had 2 vaccine doses within a single cycle. Is there any danger to prolonging menstrual cycles, especially that's like out of the blue? I'm not saying that every time there has to be this exact amount of days for every woman, but maybe something that's different for their body to handle. Do you know of it affecting any different way? I know that as a guy, this is coming out weird, but trying my best here.
Right. Well, I think I don't think there's any kind of major direct dangers from it. I think the problem is, what does it mean? I mean, why is this happening? What kind of hormonal shift occurring after this vaccine that we're seeing this, and could that hormonal shift have a long-term negative consequences? Unfortunately, I'm afraid that the answer to this is very possible. I think we'll have to wait and see what the data will show at the end of the day, but literally, there is a possibility that we're going to see some long-term, probably mild negative impact overall, but, you can't say that until more data comes out. We're seeing the same with the shifts in autoimmunity. So we see patients who have a mild autoimmune conditions, they flare up. I've seen it in my own family, in my own mother, who have a lichen planus that flared up right after vaccine within a few weeks. So there's definitely something happening. Again, for somebody like my parents in their mid-80s, I'll take that side effect because if they get acute COVID, it'll be way worse.
Yeah.
So, you have to think of that. But you also do need to be aware. I think that if we have this very careful acknowledgement and we don't brush everybody off and saying your experience is not important because it cannot happen, that's how we get the resistance in the public overall. I mean, if we look at this more holistically and say, yep, we see that this is really happening, we have to acknowledge this and we have to figure out why that happens and not ignore it.
Yeah, agreed. Yes. Otherwise, you're going to lose credibility on the point where you're trying to point out various issues that are taking place. I'm curious, from your take, they're having this conversation right now about vaccinating kids. I think from the ages, 6 months to 5, if I'm not mistaken. And with kids having such a low propensity from either dying of COVID, which is extremely low, or for that matter, I would even put, catching it per se, or getting overly sick from it. Is that something that we want to do? Is the threat of vaccination for, let's say, a 6-month-old and the potential consequences of vaccinating a 6-month-old with a still growing immune system and everything else, do the threats outweigh the potential for the vaccine in and of itself? Meaning, if these kids aren't necessarily going to get all that sick, or if they do get sick, oftentimes, overwhelmingly, it's not a situation where they're basically going to die from it, then do we really want to introduce vaccinations into 6-month-old, if that's true? I hope the question makes sense.
Yeah, no, the question makes perfect sense. And again, the full disclosure, I'm not a pediatrician. I probably shouldn't be talking about this in great detail, but I will tell you my opinion on this. And it's a bit more complicated. I think if you ask me on an individual level what to do, I say it's a very difficult decision because in reality, it's a very easy decision for me to push my parents to get vaccinated. But for the kids, the problem is, yeah, sure, there is a rapid increase in severity of illness and overall admissions in the hospitals. And I recently talked to one of my students who's doing the rotation at our children's hospital here in D.C., and they're seeing a full hospital filled with kids. Mm-hmm. Some of them are really sick, and some of them completely healthy and still very sick. So we're definitely seeing that. But the question is, with the degree of the infection spread, that increase is expected. The question is, if we vaccinate all of those kids, what are we going to see within 10, 15, 20 years from now? Are we going to see a massive spike in autoimmune conditions as a result of this? Nobody knows. Unfortunately, the data, we don't have the data. And if you look carefully at who says what, you'll realize that there are some really serious scientific voices. They're not necessarily saying don't vaccinate, but they're saying, wait a second, what are we doing here? We have to really pause for a second and try to say, how do we study this as soon as possible? Let me put it even more bluntly. Have you guys seen the randomized controlled trial of the vaccine versus not vaccinating for the Omicron?
Who ran the trial?
No, I'm asking, have you seen one?
No.
No.
No. Why? Why are we not seeing government putting the money into double-blind control randomized trial, giving placebo vaccine versus non-placebo vaccine? Why?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I see.
How do we know? How are we going to truly know the answer here? Because everybody says that it's effective? No, because there was a common sense for Delta variant to give the shot, right? because we've seen how big the mortality was. Now, as the mortality of Omicron is 10 times less, it sounds to me that we must have trial like this. And in absence of this trial, to keep saying to everybody the vaccine is uniformly safe and effective and going to protect you seems to be a lie, because I looked at my data set of my patients for past months, and it's 50-50. 50% of patients who had COVID, had Omicron, had the vaccine, and 50% not.
Yeah.
So what does it tell you? It tells you that the vaccine has very minimal protection against getting it. Now, whether or not it's having a good protection against severe illness, that probably still holds true. But now it's a much more complex answer, because none of my patients ended up in a hospital with a careful supportive care, with vitamins, with immediate attention and better hydration and general supportive care. So are we looking at this a little too simplistic at this point? Why are we not demanding the controlled trial from NIH?
Well, don't worry, Dr. Kogan. I got the placebo shot, so well, good. I'll be your test subject. But yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that we've had a couple times on, like, at this point, vaccines are not for containing transmission, because frankly, it doesn't work on Omicron. It's just that more contagious while being less lethal. So if we're really focusing on I guess having less severe symptoms and toning down the lethality of it, then that's a totally different question. It seems to me, and Garland is a huge proponent of this. He's like, okay, well, if you don't want to be as severely affected by COVID, like, let's get active. Let's be just overall healthy individuals. Gives your body the best chance to fight it. And I don't know if it's more so or less so than the vaccine at this point. I mean, probably more so now, because it's becoming more and more outdated the more we do it. But I mean, I totally see a trial like this being necessary. If I could get a prediction from you, though, Dr. Kogan, do you think that the FDA will approve this 6-month to 5-year-old Pfizer shot for emergency authorization? And if so, how long would that process take?
They will approve it, I have no doubt. That I don't know, probably another weeks to months. The reason I have no doubt is because I don't expect any difference in safety in the younger kids versus, like a little older. And also, I think the severity of illness in really small kids appears to be just as bad as in kids, say, 7 or 8, if not worse. So I think there's definitely going to be a push for that. And again, I hope that the FDA panel will say something along the lines, well, can you show us some randomized data versus just on sort of looking at overall what's happening after kids getting shots. And I don't expect that the data will be available. FDA's panel is going to have to make a decision based on non-controlled trials. And that's the problem. We are operating here in the dark. We know how often non-controlled studies or observational studies completely miss the point and over or underestimate complexity and severity of illnesses with a particular treatment, because there's so many different biases when you actually do non-controlled trials. And I hope that, you guys have been very vocal about it. I think the rationale for study here is pretty important at this point. You can't no longer justify saying, oh, let's just give the vaccine to everybody because it's very effective.
Do you see, if these trials start to come out, do you see it happening on FDA in a controlled setting? Pfizer, I mean, if these controlled trials between placebo shots versus their actual shots, maybe Pfizer conducts it, and at that point, like, can we believe it? Or is it going to be like a university study? And at what level? Because, I wouldn't necessarily not believe if Pfizer finds that against Omicron, their shot is basically useless, as close to useless as can be versus the placebo. I could totally see them not publishing that
in transmission,
because they are big pharma. So whether or not does that mean that everything they've done is wrong? No, but they're making a lot of money from this pandemic. So where would those trials come from?
I agree. I think it needs to be an NIH-sponsored trial that's controlled fully by FDA and done by independent institution in university settings or some kind of consortium of different academic centers, because you probably study like this needs to be diverse enough. That's another thing. If you do one local trial of a few hundred patients that are pretty uniform to that location, making that study result generalizable to the whole country may actually not be possible. So you have to capture enough wide population of different racial ethnicities, of different economical statuses, and different locations. I mean, all those variants do play into the results, and ignoring all this is, so that becomes a challenge, right? I mean, this needs to be a pretty sophisticated, complex study, and who's going to do this? And also, how do you quickly get this through to get it organized in real life? I put that question to you guys in a very sarcastic, negative form because I know the complexity of getting stuff like this done makes this almost impossible. But yet, I mean, I'm putting not a hypothetical question to the society.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Are we potentially creating a whole long-term generation of patients with an increase in autoimmune conditions? We're not going to have an answer to that until we live through this, unfortunately.
Dr. Kogan, that's why I love you as a guest, because you're willing to say that. It's an honest assessment, right?
Truth.
Yeah, it's basically, look, 800,000 people have died. Yes. Does it mean people need vaccines? Yes. Does it also mean we should be testing to see whether or not this vaccine is as effective as we think it is against the Omicron variant? Because there's a question of whether or not we should be giving these to kids or basically to the generation if it's not. Especially if we can't necessarily know the consequences of it 20, 30 years down the line, or even, in genes that are passed on to loved ones. How does this look in the future? And are we basically doing something in the future or doing something in ourselves to the future for something that we're trying to deal with now? I think all of those are legitimate questions. And like you said, to your point, is that something that they're going to do? And even more so, is that something they'll do if it means repudiating their previous position? Meaning for the longest time, Biden, the medical field, they've just basically relied on the vaccinations. They basically relied on the vaccinations. And so it's like, if they find out that against Omicron, it is not effective at stopping transmission, is that something they tell us? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. Dr. Kogan, thank you for this.
If they do tell us, I hope that it will come out in a neutral way, because it's easy to blame all kinds of sides here and say, oh my God, The reality is, think of it in a more detached way. I mean, none of us knew what's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, the mistakes here are bound to happen, but we have to be able to acknowledge them and say, all right, this is the best we know now, and move on. I will give you one other thought. The prior data on vaccines could potentially, without a controlled trial, be quite skewed. What do I mean by that? People who have accepted the vaccine may actually be quite different from those who refused, and we know that they are.
Wait, what do you mean? Explain that.
Well, so people who will accept the vaccine likely are going to engage in lots of other positive health behaviors. They may be more protecting themselves, wearing masks better. They may be isolating better. So there could be other factors that have increased or improved outcomes of COVID in those who have accepted vaccines. Without doing controlled trial, we're not going to have a proof or disproof of what I'm saying. And if I'm correct and this will hold, then we may be overestimating efficacy of the vaccine against Omicron. I don't think that we were overestimating it against Delta. I think that Delta was so much more deadlier that I think that it's like, do I need a control? My favorite expression from one of my mentors, Donald Abrams, he always said, I don't really need a controlled trial to tell me that aspirin works for pain.
Right.
Okay, for Delta, I think that was correct. But for the Omicron, not anymore.
Wow. Dr. Mikhail Kogan, thank you for this. I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with us. I mean, this has been a great talk. Everything from pot to COVID and even to the future of COVID in the context of those vaccinations. The voice that you guys were listening to is Dr. Mikhail Kogan. He's medical director at George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine, associate professor of medicine at George Washington University, and founder and executive director of the AIM Health Institute, a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit delivering integrative services to the vulnerable. To learn more about the AIM Health Institute, visit www.healthaim.org. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Pelly. We're coming back. We're going to take your calls. We have about 10 minutes. The number is 521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Back in a moment.
Fault lines.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Fault lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name's Austin Pelly, here with Jamarl Thomas, and we are taking your calls for the last 10 minutes. Numbers 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. I did want to get into the convoy conversation, so if you want to call in, love to have that. I did want to read a headline that popped out to me, though, on the topic of COVID, but we didn't necessarily have to talk to Kogan about this. Supposedly, approximately 5,000 blank vaccine cards and an unknown number of N95 masks were stolen today, or yesterday, from a hospital in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I've been calling this. I've been saying, like, there's only a matter of time before you see vaccine cards on the black market. And how much do you think the going rate is for a blank vaccine card? Like a legitimate one, because you can get a file pretty easily, like on your computer, but then you have to print it out. You got to get card stock.
Right. It has to look like it. It has
you
to
have
have
to
all
make
the
sure you do it front and
markings.
back. But, you got the actual card, and, doctor's handwriting.
Yeah.
Boom. Got it.
Nailed it.
Got the vaccine. But which I find it funny because they both stole vaccine cards and N95s.
Right.
So I would think if you're the person who wants to get away with not having a vaccine and you have this fake card, wouldn't be the same person that would be like, I need to wear these N95 masks.
Right. I need the mask also.
But not even just like, okay, I just don't like the vaccine, but I understand I'll wear a mask kind of people.
Yeah.
I mean, like, specifically N95s, because you can find any random mask. You can put a bandana over your face and be like, oh, it's a mask enough.
Yeah.
But, like,
They
the
wanted the one that
N95 people are
actually
like, I need the most protection whatsoever. So
I need
it's
the
just
max of my protection.
it's a funny little dichotomy there.
Yes.
We do have a couple callers.
We don't know if the same person, though, but maybe. Who knows?
We do have a couple callers, though. We've got Luis calling in from Virginia. Luis, you're on the line. What's on your mind?
Yes, to rely on the FDA and NIH, which is Fauci, for unbiased studies of the vaccine is, way behind the times.
Yeah. Fauci has a honesty problem, to put it mildly.
Yes, and so does the FDA. I think it's 45% sponsored by Big Pharma.
Yeah, I do understand. They definitely have some skin in the game. What were they projected to make this year?
Oh, some ungodly amount of money. I mean, if you think about the amount of vaccines, if you think about for the last, 4 years or 4 years at this point? Yeah, they're going to go gangbusters.
They were projected to... Okay, so they made $36 billion in 2021. Just with vaccine revenue.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, no one's denying the fact that they have skin in the game, and greed drives corporate America. Does that discount everything that they do?
Of course not.
No.
Yeah.
Do I think that whatever study comes out about the effectiveness of their vaccine should be trial run and
scrutinized?
And scrutinized and looked at 110% every single time. But Luis, thank you for the call. We got Brandon now calling in from Wisconsin. Brandon, haven't heard you on before. How you doing, my man?
I'm good. How about you guys?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Yes, I've been following this story that was broke by the Daily Poster about Biden cementing a policy that Trump did that allows private equity donors to skim fees from America's 401k retirement funds. And I've noticed I haven't seen any coverage of it on like CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, of course, Fox. And I was just wondering if you guys were familiar with that.
And what was the name of you said Daily Caller or Daily Poster? Daily Poster. That's David Sirota's organization. Sirota is quite good. So if Sirota is saying it, I would believe it. I wouldn't discount it. I haven't necessarily heard the story, but I'm not necessarily shocked by the story either. I mean, some of the policies that these guys put into place. But no, when I find the story, I'll look over it. But David Sirota is quite good. I mean, he's often pretty significant, like in regards to his journalistic integrity on that stuff. So yeah, if he's putting it out there.
He also dropped one about them fighting somebody trying to let me find it. Biden moves to block student debt victory.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Supreme Court, from my understanding, not the Supreme Court, but
the president created draconian bankruptcy laws. Now his administration appears to be trying to overturn a ruling that helps those bankrupted by student loans. And yeah, Biden was one. Yeah. So, man, we're not going to have time to go into the story. But Biden was instrumental in making student loans unreleasable.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, where you're basically stuck with them. And this goes into the whole Biden Inc. stuff where, because of his own connections and the people who were associated with him, even some of his family members, there were certain things that he was basically doing to make our lives more miserable. This was one of them, unfortunately. And so Biden has the capability of getting rid of student loans. He could do it with the flick of a pen, as they say it. And even the capability or the skill where they would say, okay, we're going to postpone those loans. That's the same capability that he has. Now, the rub is that if Biden did get rid of student loans, it's possible for the IRS to come after you later and saying, well, this was paid off. And because this was paid off, you now owe us taxes on that money because that was basically something similar to income. And they can still go after you for that after this is paid off. So they put a little provision that basically, if those loans are basically paid off, then the IRS can't come after you after the fact to get the money for the loans. All of this stuff was taking place kind of behind the scenes when it was being negotiated and fought about. However, Biden never went through with the student loan thing. So the provision is there, but the provision is almost somewhat of a moot point. But yeah, I mean, this administration's been somewhat of a failure on this front.
The stories, and I didn't know if you guys, knew about them or not. I just haven't seen it being covered anywhere else. So I just, thought I'd put a bug in you guys.
No, I appreciate it. Walter Bragman has been on the show before. He's one of the people who wrote Biden Moves to Block Student Debt Victory. And so maybe I can reach out to Walter Bragman to get him to kind of have a conversation about it. But
you don't, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate this. Thank you for giving us a heads up on the stories. Both of those are quite good.
I did find the story on Daily Poster, and it was of basically saving retirement funds of kingpins.
Oh, man. That's always great.
Yeah, so you got Wall Street execs who make hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and it's to pave the way for private equity donors to skim fees from Americans' 401k retirement accounts. And Biden reinstated it.
Crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would like to give this a thorough read before I fully comment on it. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that he does this. And where was this reported?
I mean, but look at it this way.
This is reported in the Daily Poster, which...
But Austin, he's going to choose a black woman.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Makes it way better.
So it clearly balances everything out, right? He's clearly backing up the African American community by putting the African American in, despite him doing this. That's going to adversely affect pretty much of the country. Yeah, man. Thank you, man. I really appreciate this. Thank you for the call. Make sure you call us back and join us. But this is the end of a show. This is Friday. This is going to be my last day living in Silver Spring, Maryland.
You have a tough weekend ahead of you.
Yes. But nevertheless, I'll be here on Monday. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank my co-host, Austin Pelly. I want to thank our engineer. I want to thank our producer. He's not necessarily feeling all that well. He's under the weather, but he's been doing an exceptional job on the show. And I want to thank all of you for joining us and listening and, joining us for the show and help making this little community work, this little engine that could. You guys have a phenomenal day. Stay warm and stay dry. We'll see you guys next week. Fault Lines, Thomas and Pelly. Have a good one, guys.